Sword of Coming Chapter 801. On the side of the Parrot Island house, when a woman in a green shirt and that red shirt suddenly disappeared, Taoist Nen and Lu Qiqing looked at each other. Qin Pingan was not easy. Li Huai was picking the meat with a toothpick and it seemed that he didn't realize it. Don't think too much about things you don't understand. Lu Qiqing was surprised and asked curiously, Friend Nen, when will Qin Pingan be ready to start the world? As for the vision brought by Li Baoping's random words, Lu Qiqing was not interested in it at all. The tender Taoist caught a large chopsticks dish, chewed the fish, cheeks bulging, and said, It is not the magic of the immortal family but the magical power of this kid, a flying sword. The sword of the Great Wall. By the way, there are all kinds of weird flying swords and Qin Pingan is a hermit official, so there is no need to make a fuss about friends Lu. The Taoist Nen lifted the chopsticks again and dropped it with his hand. A pair of chopsticks were as fast as flying swords, and they flew in the courtyard. After a while, Taoist Nen reached out his hand to catch the chopsticks, frowned slightly, and fiddled with only a small half of the braised carp on the plate. Originally, Taoist Nen wanted to find where the Xiao Shandy barrier was so I could say something like Lu Qiqing, see if you see it, this is the sword chi barrier, I just broke it. Never thought that the small world of young hermits is not ordinary, it seems to have completely bypassed the long river of time. Taoist Nen is not really unable to find clues, but it is equivalent to asking the sword, and the gain is not worth the loss. Taoist Nen made up his mind that as long as Qin Pingan entered the Ascension realm in the future, he would have to hide away from him. You should go to your mother's account if you get 10% of the income. Let Luopishen always owe Laozi's favor. Lu Qiqing didn't know what was the meaning of Taoist Nen's use of sword control, and asked, Taoist Nen, is this? Taoist Nen laughed and said, Help the hidden officer to protect the road 1 or 2, so that there are still old rascals in the Ascendant realm who know nothing about life and death, and spy on this place by looking at the mountains and rivers. Lu Qiqing will doubt it. Now the Ascended realm monks near the Confucian temple, especially those who are not qualified to participate in the proceedings, Nan Guangguang and Jinghao are half dead, Feng Shuatao drags alien to another world, and the rest are shattered with courage. Tail life? God knows if a Howren Nen Taoist will stop, and then run out of an old Taoist? From left to right, a Liang has already taken action. Will it be Qi Tingji's turn next, and Lu Ji's sword repairman will join in the fun? The Jingsheng who was in charge of the gate of the Confucian temple was peaceful, but from beginning to end, he didn't intervene once, and it was up to these mountain monks to blame themselves. Therefore, the 4 ferry crossings at the moment seem to be haunted by wind and rain. Many big monks have some hindsight that Confucian temple is different. Ripples around the table, Qin Pingan and Li Baoping appeared on the spot. As if nothing happened, Qin Pingan began to clean up the dishes. Li Baoping was startled and seemed to be thinking about things. Li Huai glanced at Li Baoping, accustomed to it, anyway she was like this when she was a child, there were always endless questions, endless puzzles, maybe this is the so-called seed of reading? However, Li Huai felt that Li Baoping was a little cute. She often didn't know why she had a leg with a cast on her leg and limped on crutches to the school. After class it turned out to be Li Baoping. The fastest, dare to believe it? Lu Qiqing felt that pretending to be stupid seemed unhelpful on Qin Pingan's side, so he tentatively said, Qin Pingan, these clever methods are most suitable for use as a killer, so you need to be cautious when using it. Don't leak the news easily. Don't worry, I will not mention a word with anyone except the brother. And I promise that as long as the brother does not take the initiative to ask, I will never say it. Qin Pingan nodded. Lu Qiqing's ability to say this shows his sincerity. Taoist Nen began to put on the predecessor's prestige on the path of cultivation and said, Dao Yu Liu's golden and good words are loyal to your ears, Qin Pingan, you must listen to it, don't take it seriously. Qin Pingan smiled and said, The wind knows the strong grass, I know the character of Dao Yu Lu in my heart. Taoist Nen suddenly asked, What are your plans in the future? If we go to the wild world, the 3 of us can get together. Qin Pingan said, I have no long-term plans to take a step at a time. I have no plans to go back to the Great Wall of Sword Chi for the time being. You and Lu Qiqing should be more careful. For example, first go to Beiju Luzhou, then Tonggishao, travel to the divine continent of Middle-earth, and then go to Wuxia Faishinshinch, go to Qingming xianxia, Sui Chugong Dashuan Duguan by Yujing will visit. In short, it's a step-by-step thing. Looking through the map of the 5 sacred mountains, I think I know the mountains and am not as good as a woodcutter. People in the mountains do not believe that a fish is as big as a tree, and people in the sea do not believe that a tree is as big as a fish. In fact, as long as you have seen it in person, you will believe it. Qin Pingan finished clearing the table and asked with a smile, Would you like tea? On the side of xianxia in Chunlapu, I learned the magical tea-making skills with my friend Lu Jiqing. Lu Jiqing nodded and said, try it. Taoist Nin took out a pot of wine by himself, I'll save it. Chen Pingan took out a set of tea sets from a nearby object and began to make tea, drew symbols on the table with his fingers, and boiled the tea soup with 2 dragons. The things at hand, and the things in his heart are actually waiting for Chen Pingan to solve one by one. Some things will be handled very quickly, and the things that used to be a big trouble with a few punches and swords are gradually no longer a trouble. There are some things you need to think more about and go slower. Chen Pingan gave Li Baoping a cup of tea each and suddenly asked Lu Jiqing, is it difficult to build a mountain ferry? Lu Jiqing nodded and said, shipbuilding is not difficult. Find a few mahists and artisans to train gas. As long as you are not a liar, you can piece together one. The hard part is to make money. The knowledge is not shallow here and the water is deeper. As for transcontinental ferry boats have a higher threshold. The vast world relies on the Xinjia mountain to eat. There are only a dozen such ferry boats that can be built. In fact, there are only a handful of them. Why, you need to cross continents. Ferry? Chen Pingan, it's not that I poured cold water. I advise you not to go to the muddy waters. You are too expensive to spend money with people. I can help match the bridge, save worry, effort and money. Chen Pingan reluctantly said, it's like knocking on the door today? Thanks for this kind of worry and effort. Chen Pingan really needs to help Luopishan find a few new ways to make money. Once the next clan is established in another continent, Shantao has an intercontinental ferry, which becomes an urgent need. Lu Jiqing complained, you underestimated me? Forgot that I was in Baidi City and there was a pavilion master? Before the disaster in Aquarius, there were a lot of business contacts on the mountain. I took care of it myself. Speaking of this, seeing Chen Pingan still unmoved, Lu Jiqing suddenly became proud, tapped his finger on the table, squinted and said with a smile, Chen Pingan, let me tell you a secret matter on the top of the mountain in front of Hualong. In the past few years I sold many glazed tiles that I had searched from nowhere. They were of excellent quality, and they could rank among the first-class treasures of the Lioli Pavilion. There were 100 pieces of green glazed tiles. The real fire dragon only bid one price. Thousands and 500 grains of rain money. Now my Lioli Pavilion, with this opportunity, finally refined into a flawless immortal soldier. Every time after the rain the sky will be colorful, the radiance will be bright, and the beauty is so beautiful. In the future there will be the selection of the Howran 10 scenic spots, and the Lioli Pavilion, which has been unsuccessful many times, will definitely be able to rank amongst the place. Old gods like the fire dragon will have to do business with me. What about other sect monks? Chen Pingan looked strange. Lu Jiqing smugly said, it's not that I am boasting. My brother has not set foot in Lioli Pavilion for 2,000 years. Before he went to Fuyao Island he specifically climbed to the top of Lioli Pavilion to enjoy the scenery. Chen Pingan declined to say, forget it, I don't bother you about the intercontinental ferry, I will find the way myself. I remember that I made a half-fold and sold the 120 pieces of green glazed tiles that I had worked so hard to sell to the real fire dragon on the side of Longgong Dongshan, and received 600 grains of rain. Okay, when the old man changed hands he got 1,500 in his pocket. The key to the old man seems to have left 20 glazed tiles? Taoist Nen exclaimed, can account for a large number of people from Hualong cheap. Lu Daoyu is really a rare business genius. I think Brother Lu can be a god of wealth in Luapa Mountain, and he won't let Chen Pingan take a lot of trouble to break the ferry boat. Others look hard to bear. Lu Jiqing glanced at Chen Pingan, eager to try. It's okay to be a registered accountant on the side of Luapa Mountain. Chen Pingan twitched the corners of his mouth and said nothing. Li Huai casually said, this time the Confucian temple discussion, so many big people have come. Chen Pingan, your elders are so good and you are fair in doing business. Hearing Pei Qian said, all those who trade with you have made money, but still lack. Did you have an intercontinental ferry? I don't think it can. Chen Pingan laughed off. Looked at Chen Pingan, who fell in love with drinking and also learned to make tea. Lu Jiqing sighed for no reason. He knew Chen Pingan very early. It seems to be a trance, not a teenager for a while. A visitor came to visit, an old man with the appearance of a wealthy man, Yu Panshui, with a young man in genie, Yuan Su, the emperor of the Xianmi dynasty. In fact, the two groups of people are only the guests of this house. Chen Pingan immediately went to the door, and after opening the door he said, I have seen Mr. Yu, it should have been a younger generation visiting. Li Baoping smiled and called to Grandpa Yu. Li Huai hesitated and followed Chen Pingan to call the other party Mr. Yu. In fact, he didn't know who was sacred. The expert surnamed Yu only knows that there is a Yu Panshui who seems to be the supreme emperor of the mystic dynasty. He is very powerful. He has a smiling face with needles and mianli. As for his appearance, I only heard that he is an old scholar who has a refined temperament and describes xuanhuan. Especially when he was young, beauty wind god, didn't match the chubby old man in front of him. Yu Panshui nodded in greeting, smiled so that his eyes disappeared, and finally looked at Qin Pingan and nodded, as if the kind elders in the family, seeing the family Junyan who had returned from a long journey and had not seen each other for a long time, it was both gratifying to the young people. Ishi, complaining about the unfamiliarity of the younger generation, said, "What kind of courtesy is with me? It's heartbreaking to see it like this." In fact, the two parties have never met before, but they are already as good as their own family members. After the two groups of people took their seats, Yu Panshui smiled and asked, "Will you play chess? Why don't we talk with hands and chat?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "I play chess, the juniors are laymen." Yu Panshui regretted it and did not force it. The young emperor's eyes widened, and he always felt that the sword fairy in Qingshan he saw at this moment was a fake hermit. How could he be so gentle and modest? Sitting opposite Fatty Yu, respectful, the younger generation considers themselves. Play chess? Swish, swish, sacrifice those flying swords, stop on the head of this old stinky chess basket. Fatty Yu, teach him to play chess and play wherever he wants. The outsider may not know, he will not know. Every time Yu Lauer wins chess, he colludes with the maidservant who is a wood wild fox to cheat. Yu Panshui pointed to Yuan Su next to him and smiled, "This time it is mainly because your majesty wants to see you." Qin Pingan smiled and clasped his fists, shaking lightly, "A husband, I have seen your majesty." Yuan Su finally did not continue to be disappointed. If the young hidden official stood up and thought or something, he would be really not interested in talking. The young man clasped his fist and said, "My name is Yuan Su. I hope to invite the hidden official to come to us. Be a guest over there, walk around, see the treasured land of Feng Shui, build a sect and collect disciples when you see the embryonic cultivator. From the court to the mountain, the mysterious dynasty will open a convenient door for the hermit. The hermit is willing to be the national teacher, better, no matter what he does, he will be justified." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Thank your majesty for his love, but the art industry has specialization, swords and woods, not as good as catty axes. Mysterious national power, flourishing, the court and the martial arts, will be suitable. Where do I need to be a sword repairer from a foreign country to point out? It's too inappropriate, I don't have the shame to be embarrassed. But if I travel to the Middle-earth god continent in the future, I will definitely stay in the Xianmi dynasty." Yuan Zhou was disappointed, still unwilling to give up, and asked tentatively, "His master, what can I do to help?" Qin Pingan handed over a cup of tea and said, "I believe that there will be trouble with your majesty in the Xuanmi dynasty in the future." Yuan Su still had to speak, and Yu Panshui smiled and said, "Dignified 955, don't be like a lady." Yuan Su was not upset, he sighed, took the tea from Qin Pingan and was bored. The result was so hot that he stood up, screamed and finally took a stance, his face flushed and his dantian became angry. Li Huai opened his eyes to the side. "This young man is the emperor of one of the 10 great dynasties of Hauran? Very promising." Yu Panshui smiled and asked, "In our mysterious arsenal, there is an idle fairy boat which is still eating ashes. I don't know if there is a need for luopashan?" Yuan Su said vaguely, "As long as you need it, you can give it to the hermit. Anyway, that fairy is a private item in my name and no one can control it. Those old men in the clan mansion who dare to talk, I will let Grandpa Yu broke with them." Yu Panshui smiled and nodded, "Your majesty is true." Qin Pingan, what do you mean by this? Qin Pingan said, "No merit is not rewarded and luopashan can be bought with money. I don't know how many grains of rain money is needed." Yu Panshui stretched out and said, "Not much, just this amount of guyuqian. I said in advance that this intercontinental ferry named Fengyuan has been around for quite a while, and I want to travel across continents. It can withstand the wind and rain, the sword ferry hacks, and it may need a bit of stitching, which will be a lot of money." Qin Pingan's eyelids trembled. A wind and kite cross-continent ferry can be bought. The Luopashan treasury managed by Wei Wenlong has small savings, but if they are used to buy the boat and build the next project, they will be stretched, especially this repair. In one matter, even Yu Panshui said it was a not small ferry money, and Qin Pingan was really unassuming. Yu Panshui is self-confident, but he is not hypocritical? If it was the embroidered tiger at the beginning, there would be no talk of nothing meritorious as long as you dare to give it in vain. I dare to accept it. Qin Pingan put down the teacup in his hand and smiled and said, "Then let's start with Mr. Yes, your majesty's words are true." Then Qin Pingan said sincerely in his eyes, "We need this ferry at Luapa Mountain. As for the repair costs, we have to pay for it with the Shuami dynasty first." Yupan Shui was speechless for a while. The young emperor felt that this was the hermit who was familiar with him. On the side of Bailudu, Tianhuan still insisted not to lead Jianghu, only willing to come up with a cavernous secret realm that could support the monks to ascend to the ascending realm. Cui Dongshan was not in a hurry. Jiang Shangzhen sat next to Tianhuan and took out a piece of colorful paper with flowers and birds watching the beautiful flowers and the moon. The mist rose and a landscape painting appeared on the table. Tianhuan said, "My bottom line is to protect my own avenue. I have worked hard for thousands of years. I can't put it into running water. Otherwise it will be different from death. Besides, as long as I have everything, you can just take it away. I just hope you don't. It's hard for a strong man. I don't believe in either of you either. This time I came to see me on a special trip. I was just asking for a bamboo basket to fetch water." Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "What if we are really just having fun?" Tianhuan shook her head and said, "I have decided I want to kill or cut whatever you want." Cui Dongshan shook his sleeves and took out the soul and soul of Na Tianhuan from the big white sleeves, twisting his fingers into a wick. Even if she was close at hand, Tianhuan didn't dare to fight for it, but her mind was drawn and her body trembled with pain. She still gritted her teeth and said nothing. Jiang Shangzhen's mind is on the scroll. Cui Dongshan glances after wearing glasses. Washuyu said in shock, "Chief Zhou, your taste is a bit heavy." In the picture scroll, there is a fat woman with heavy makeup, her head full of head, scratching her head there. Jiang Shangzhen sighed, "Brother Cui, this is where you are inferior to the old cook." The woman just turned a deaf ear to her ears, began to dance lightly, raised her orchid fingers, her figure turned, and suddenly she looked back with a shy smile. Someone dropped the fairy money and began to curse wildly. Jiang Shangzhen left a small summer money, was familiar with the road, changed his voice and shouted, "Sister Jean, oh, this is so beautiful today." The woman scolded with a smile, "It's a dead, unconscionable thing, how long hasn't seen my sister?" Afterwards, the woman talked about the sword fairy of Fengshui Temple in the Wei and Jin dynasties. Between words, the love and admiration was beyond words, and many men began to curse again. And some fairies who were silent before began to compete with those men and scold them. They are all female sisters on the mountain of Wei de Jiangxian. While helping his sisters and sisters to scold men, Jiang Shangzhen took out an inkstone, and this side just started a beautiful scene. In the picture scroll, a burly man Jin Dama sitting on a chair laughed and said, "Everyone that Jiang thief was successfully usurped by Wei Ying." He didn't say that he could not be the sect master of Yugui, but even the next sect. The true realm sect's position cannot be kept, it must be the situation of the rivers going downhill. It is very pleasant to drink a bowl. The cheers are constant, the chittering and drinking one after another, can make a sound of course by throwing money. It seems that they are all those who are not short of money. Among them is Jiang Shangzhen. Someone lost money and wondered with the man, "Sect master, this embryo was just a fairy back then, how could he stray around Tongyi's house without being killed? What's the matter?" Jiang Shangzhen immediately followed, and while throwing money he shouted out of his throat, "It doesn't make sense, it's broken, I'm so angry." Well, the true monarch is also there. "Jiang Zishi, it's been a long time since I saw you, so lucky to meet." Jiang Shangzhen kept spending money and talked about the old with those in the same way. Someone asked, "After the true monarch collapsed, your son must be a savage anti-thief who is extremely hidden." The thrones of Yuan Shou and Fei Fei deliberately released water. "Isn't it?" Jiang Shangzhen sneered and said, "When the Shanshuadi report is lifted, we can say a few words of justice so as to teach the old master Jiang to correct the mistakes. If there is no error, I will give him more encouragement. As the father of the thief, I must just kill my relatives." Someone sighed with emotion, "The true monarch is broken, he is indeed kind." Broken true monarch? Jiang Zishi Jiang Shang is really his father? Rao is Cui Dongshan with a look of doubt. Jiang Shangzhen said in a serious manner, "This mountain, named Jiangzong, has gathered heroes and heroes from all over the world. There are monks from Tongye, Aquarius and Baijulu. I have contributed money and efforts and I spent almost 3 years on promotion. After 10 years of hard work, I have finally made it my last consecration. At the beginning I was misunderstood because of my surname Jiang, and I finally explained it clearly." Someone suddenly cursed, "His mother, I traveled to Tongyi's house before. It was not Jiang thief's cloud cave blessed land. It was just a hilltop of Yuguazong's vassal. However, he said that Jiang thief is a waste and a prodigal. A guy jumped out and made noise with me. Someone asked, "Have you hit?" I hit someone. I was also charged with grudges, and I was not allowed to go to those ferry crossings in the future. Jiang Shangzhen immediately smashed the money, her pride. There are so many people on the other side, brother, you are a glorious defeat. It's Jiang Zishi who speaks quickly. The monks of Yuguazong are not good things. The upper beam is not upright and the lower beam is crooked. They bully others. They don't have the ability to fart. They are really capable. Why didn't they just kill Yuan Shou? All his mother is the Jiang thief's credit, and Yuan Shou's throne has not been able to kill this stumbling ant. It is hateful and hateful. This fellow Jiang Zhe in fact doesn't have any abilities. It's just that the old sect master Sun has dim eyes and he was chosen as the sovereign master. It is nothing more than relying on the big tree of Yuguazong to enjoy the cool, and Yunku Fudi has the slightest scenery today. Jiang Shangzhen immediately urged the heroes from all walks of life, "Dear brothers, who of you is proficient in blindfolding or escaping? Why don't you go to the blessed land of the Cloud Cave and do something quietly?" All of a sudden, there was a lot of discussion, making suggestions and going back and forth. Never thought that the Lord waved his hand. I waited for the hero to scold and beat, but I couldn't do that. Jiang Shangzhen made a small sum of money. The true meaning of the suzerain is Yin Tian. Tianhuan looked stunned and could not hear. Are these people really so determined, or are they playing around? Cui Dongshan hugged the back of his head with both hands, shook the bamboo chair lightly and said with a smile, "Compared to the bookstore where Lao Xiaocai and I wandered back then, it is actually better." Jiang Shangzhen nodded and heard that story. It was at the gate of the Tapingshan site that Qin Pingan once chatted casually. Some people are in the sky and Yunxiao protects them. Some people blindly fly to camp. Some people open their eyes with the day and rest their hearts with the month. Some people just bow their heads and plan to eat. Some people only hate reading and writing, not as good as the ancients. Some people are working hard, not talking about peace of mind, just looking for a place to stand. There are good people doing wrong one day and bad people doing good one day. Perhaps the best student boy in the school has become an official and will never return to his hometown. Maybe the stubborn boy in the school, walking around the city and going wild, met the teacher one day in a back alley and respectfully gave way. There are many inevitability in life, but there are just as many accidents. They are all possibilities, large and small, just like stars hanging in the sky, bright and dim. Those who were in the midst of the sky suddenly fell into the mud one day, and their bodies were covered with the shoe prints of passing passengers. The generation of those who live in the camp and go out can also shelter people around them. The visionary man suddenly became disappointed in the world one day, and his life began to go downhill. Those who bow their heads and plan to eat, occasionally raise their heads, they give birth to hope for life and go far and high. Some people think that life is meaningless, boring, just interesting. Some people think that life is boring, hard, but meaningful. Some young people are depressed and some old people are young. Someone has a big dream and never wakes up. Some people are extremely painful and hard to get drunk. Some people think that only the sages in the books can reason, and some people think that the hard work of the peasants is the truth, and a lonely and helpless old woman can lead her life calmly. Some people think that they understand all the truths, and that they have a bad life and blame the truth. If you have a bad life, grit your teeth and blame others. Go for nothing. Some people feel that they don't understand anything, that they have a bad life because they don't know much about the truth. If you still have a bad life, tell yourself so be it. In the end, some people have never been Yang Luyi or Chao Changing Fei. On the road of life he has been paving roads and bridges, planting willows all the way. Someone's eyes widened, struggling to find the shadow of this world. Sleep soundly when the night falls and get up again when the sun goes 3 poles. Mingyue Mountain, thorny forest, green pond, spring wave, peach blossom. The same rice raises hundreds of people on different life paths. In the dreams last night, the flowers and the moon are in the spring breeze. In addition, Qin Pingan was bidding farewell to Zheng Juzhong. After leaving Wenjindu, he found a martial artist from the Duduan dynasty and said he wanted to ask Quan. The man was puzzled. Why? Qin Pingan said, no. Unless you are not Ma Zhuxian. When the great master standing on the top of the martial arts mountain around the temple below, the light and the dark are added together, about the number of hands. Middle-earth Zhang Tiaoxia Beipingzisong Changjing Beiju Luzhou Wang Fuyu, Tongis Hao Wu Tan Ai Ijo Peiaxiang. Are all 10-level martial artists of Quanggao Izhou. Although Ma Zhuxian has always been arrogant, he doesn't have his eyes higher than the top, and feels that he can now compare with these predecessors. Among the 10 young people in the world previously selected, the hidden official in front of him is the 11th, with his dual identities as the Nine-Realm Warrior and Yuaning Jianxiu, occupying a place. It's just that Ma Zhuxian learned from the master and the younger brother that Qin Pingan had actually already reached the 10th realm on Tangyi's house. Therefore, Qin Pingan visited the house today and asked him about his posture, which is equivalent to asking 9 states from 10 states. It is absolutely unreasonable and it is not honorable to win. Of course, Qin Pingan really insisted on asking punches, and Ma Zhuxian didn't mind receiving punches either. Ma Zhuxian is a great warrior, and even a battlefield general who has emerged from the ranks. He now commands an elite frontier army of up to 200,000 people. So Ma Zhuxian was too lazy to think and asked with a smile, how to ask. Give you 2 choices. If you lose a punch, first apologize and admit your mistake and then return something. Qin Pingan said, if you lose a punch you will fall into the realm. There is no hope for 10 realms in this life. Later I will ask Pei Cup for a punch and retrieve that thing. Ma Zhuxian was confused when he heard it. What is this all about? What apology, who admits wrong? What to return? There is no intersection between him and Qin Pingan. Dou Fengxian smiled, clenched the stone in her hand, raised the back of her hand and pressed her lips, feeling that this young hidden official was a little bit cute and aggressive. Liao Qingai said coldly, Qin Pingan, this is not a place where you can go wild. Qin Ping placed it on deaf ears, but stretched out a palm towards Ma Zhuxian, indicating that the opponent can punch first. The grievances are clear. When I visited today I only asked Ma Zhuxian about the boxing. I wanted to use the principles that Ma Zhuxian was good at, and use his own way to treat his body in the martial arts. Naturally, it has nothing to do with the Duduan dynasty with the pair of masters and disciples like Pei Cup and Chao Ci, and with the 2 female martial artists Dou and Liao. But if someone must blend in with it, Qin Pingan would make sense together. Liao Qingai turned her head to look at one place suddenly, with a displeased face. Even the monks on the mountain dared to watch the mountains and rivers from the distance. At the same time, Dou Fengxia smiled and raised her hand. It was a mustard seed, gently pressed against her eyebrows, like a visitor standing at the door without knocking. Dou Fengxia's entire white face was slightly puffed away, and the snake bun on her head quietly loosened. She didn't dare to make any movements anymore. The bamboo leaves that had lost the spirit of a martial artist and supported by pure innocence slammed apart. Many of them fell between her hair and shoulders. She stomped her foot, revealing the shy appearance of a girl, and complained, sure enough, there is no fight at all. Dou Fengxia patted her palms, and she patted the stones and bamboo leaves that had previously been broken by Qin Ping's sleeve and disappeared. Qin Pingan knew that this Dou Fengxia was a knife hunter who deliberately revealed his identity. This martial art is a pure martial artist, but it can naturally defeat the martial artist through secret methods. When a fighter from the same realm meets her, it is like a chi trainer encountering a sword repair, extremely difficult, and the chance of winning is extremely small. It's just that the sword hunter has a line of martial arts. It seems that I only heard that there are many in the Qingming world, but Haoran has rarely done anything here. It's a pity that even student Chui Dongshan knew nothing about this technique of catching the sword. So Qin Pingan learned a little bit of fur, and he could only use it to scare and frighten people. In the face of life and death, there was absolutely no chance to use it. Dou Fengxia smiled, still looking at the calm and relaxed green-shirt guest, secretly gathered the sound into a line, and reminded Ma Zhuxian, brother, I guessed it. Apart from being a sword repairman, Qin Pingan is still deep. The hidden knife hunter can be regarded as my colleague. In the next questioning punch, the senior must be careful. You can't be too careful. Ma Zhuxian didn't appreciate it. It was just a questioning fist, conceded in life and death. Dou Fengxia calculated the opponent like this and lost more uselessly. It was not just that she was inferior in skill, so she replied with junior sister. Junior sister doesn't have to spend so much thought. Dou Fengxia's expression was complacent, as if it was the young hidden official who was flirting with each other, but the words with the senior brother were angry. When you look at the other party, you are not a good stubborn. You will be asked by a 10-level martial artist. What face do you want? For the face you are the most squeamish old man. If I am you, the 3 of them will bore him together. Qin Pingan smiled. I roughly guessed Dou Fengxia's thoughts, but he didn't explain it face to face. Ma Zhuxian began to move forward slowly, and the other party came to the door. As the perfect martial artist of the 9 realms who was only half a step away from the top of the mountain, and the big disciple of the master in name, there was no reason not to receive the fist. It turned out to be a boxing technique that draws the aura of heaven and earth and then refines it into a mouthful of pure true energy. How is such a martial artist different from a refiner? Playing against a gas trainer is not equivalent to sitting in an impossible place by nature? Ma Zhuoxian passed away in a flash. Dou Finxia and Liao Qing'ai were unable to capture the trace of the big brother. I only heard the fists from both sides, like a string of spring thunder blowing in the bamboo forest. The next moment, it was Ma Zhuoxian's turn to stand where the blue shirt was standing, and the arm that threw the fist trembled slightly with blood oozing out. Sleeves. The vision of the two women Wufu was farther away. The man stood on a green bamboo pole that seemed to be nodding to the ground. With his hands folded, he was condescending, still seeing only Ma Zhuoxian in his eyes. He smiled and asked, I still want to make a fist. When I am a friend from afar. Liao Qing'ai said solemnly, if you ask for a fist, ask for a fist. Use words to humiliate others. You are also worthy to be a master. Qin Pingan nodded, it makes sense, it sounds a lot like that. There is an old man in Aquarius, with a standing sword and a yellow bamboo scabbard. Every time he walks in the rivers and lakes, he flips through the old almanac before going out. As a result, the old man once was at home and was visited by a Takeshi from Bezu to buy a scabbard. If he didn't sell it, he died. He had to take the 2 lives of his grandson and daughter-in-law. Probably from that day on, the old man no longer had the world in his heart, and he began to obey the old, unable to read the old almanac. Why, I, Qin Pingan, just chatted with you a few words today and thought I was not worthy of being a martial artist. Ma Zhuoxian thought of the young hermit who was from Ao Pingzhou, and suddenly remembered something and asked tentatively, what is the relationship between you and an old man named Song in Susui State? Finally remembered. Qin Pingan narrowed his eyes and slowly said, what's the relationship? The relationship between senior and junior. Senior Song taught me a sword skill. A sword goes, 1,000 troops make a change. It is connected to the Great Wall of Jianghu in the main road. Qin Pingan moved a step sideways, stepped off the bamboo pole and touched the ground with his feet. A green bamboo beside him instantly straightened, and the bamboo leaves swayed violently. Qin Pingan asked, have you forgotten the old man's name? Ma Zhuoxian sneered and said, so that's it. Yes, I can't remember the name of the old guy. Remember the old martial artist in that zhuangzi? Is it the 6th or 7th martial artist? For the small country of Aquarius, it is probably the great master of a country's leaders? Ma Zhuoxian only vaguely remembered that the other party didn't know good and bad at first, was low-level and courageous, and determined not to sell the scabbard. Li Xing opened the restriction. Bai Zhe stood up and disappeared from the river bank first. The old scholar Pidian trot all the way, replaced Bai Zhe, sat next to Qin Pingan, reached out his hand and said disappointedly, this old Mr. Bai Zhe, how he is an elder, didn't pull a golden lump on the ground. Lu Qin stood on tiptoe and waved away, Qin Pingan, see you later, waiting for you. Qin Ping's placement is deaf. The old monk Xinqing seemed to fight Qin Pingan with a smile and said with a smile, the weather in Dongshan, the romantic wind in the North Sea, the practice of Dinghuajia, the god will be the medicine master Buddha. Although Qin Pingan didn't understand anything, he still stood up, folded his hands together and respectfully returned the old monk. Lu Qin smiled with satisfaction and nodded to himself, sure enough, you should be more intimate with Xiaodao, you don't have to pay attention to these polite manners. On the banks of the long river of time, in the end, a 14th realm great monk, like comets from the earth, went to the sky and disappeared for a moment. Wu Shuangjiang will continue to travel through the wild world, looking for the trouble of the old deaf child on the Great Wall of Jianghu. Yu Dou glanced at the sword-backed young man in a blue shirt before returning to the world of Qingming and continuing to sit in by Yujing. The dragon-cutting man who is now alias Chen Zhuoyo intends to find the jianghu that has occupied the magpie's nest for 3,000 years. It is time to move the nest to the old master. Qinggong Taibao? What green palace? Naturally it is his place of cultivation. If he hadn't decided to cut the dragon back then Howran wouldn't have only one Baidi city, there would be a Qingdi city first. Qin Pingan sat back where he was. She turned around, stretched out her hand, clenched her fist, and handed it to Qin Ping. An unknown Qin Pingan went inside, stretched out his palm, but she suddenly held it and smiled. Since it seems to be just a blink of an eye, 20 years have passed, so thinking about it, the Jiazi covenant is nothing. I just take a nap in the place where you practice swords. Don't take other girls to the outside world at that time. If you don't enter the ascended realm by that time, you can say hello to Li Sheng. Qin Pingan sighed and nodded gently, which was regarded as agreeing to her. The old scholar gasped in air without squinting, sitting upright like a clock, and said awe-inspiringly, the scenery on the other side is beautiful. She let go of her hand and stood up. Qin Pingan got up and said, "Why do you have to go to Tianwai? You can go to the Howran world. For thousands of years, I have actually been in my hometown, and there is nothing to move around." She blinked. "Stay in Howran world? I'm afraid it will be too jealous." Qin Pingan looked embarrassed and immediately shut up. She looked at Qin Pingan, saw herself in his eyes, and in her own eyes, there was only him. She smiled, took a step back and said softly, "Go." Qin Pingan nodded. She turned the rainbow away, broke the sky, and went straight to the sky. At the next moment, Qin Pingan found himself at a mountain top. The top of Mount Sui. An old gentleman stood not far away, smiling and looking at him. Qin Pingan couldn't afford it and he didn't know what to say. The old scholar jumped his feet and said, "How can this be done? How is it done? The ceremony is too great. I am a closed disciple, no matter how young, no matter how diligent in academics, no matter how good the mind and cultivation ability, no matter how outstanding people are in the world, after all, I still cannot afford this. What a great honor." Li Sheng stood aside, most not seeing the old scholar's virtue of being cheap and good-favored, and said with a smile, "The gift is too big? Who was begging for it before?" The old scholar rubbed his hands and said, "It's not good to hit people without slapping them in the face, or curse people without revealing shortcomings. I don't understand the rules of the saint of rituals. As a husband, why not ask for what you can ask for?" The old gentleman smiled and said, "Xiaotsai, you disciple, didn't you say that you are so handsome?" Qin Pingan straightened up, a little embarrassed. Immediately the inspiration came and Qin Pingan was shocked. So before the 14-realm great monks gathered at the riverside, in the end, they didn't even know what to discuss, and it made sense. The old man hummed, nodded and smiled. "Smart, it's smarter than imagined. That's right, you don't know how to read, what do you do with reading?" The old man laughed and said, "One person is good." Qin Pingan hesitated, waited for a moment and had no choice but to answer, 10,000 people are exciting." The old man continued to ask, "Ask more?" Qin Pingan replied, "It's okay." The most sacred master smiled and nodded, "Very good." Sword of Coming Chapter 803. Qin Pingan, who was backing his sword again, appeared under the steps outside the gate of the Confucian temple. Lin Junbai is so courageous, it seems that he just woke up from alcohol? Seeing Qin Pingan who was climbing up the stairs, Lin Junbai immediately dispelled his drunkenness, shouted, "Lord Hidden Officer," then smiled and said nothing. Qin Pingan nodded and praised, "Dare to be drunk at the gate of the Confucian temple. Junbai is so powerful and aggressive. You must not bring a big basket with you when you go out to avoid hurting others." Lin Junbai was embarrassed. There were also some monks who came out to drink and relieve their boredom. They all looked sideways at the blue shirt, it was really impossible for them to care. Those who are eligible to discuss matters here are better informed by the gossip. I know that this young man with a sword back in front of me, don't look at the smiling man, in fact has a very bad temper. When the hidden official in the previous discussion he was this person, dare not to take a Tuoyua mountain and the entire wild world in his eyes, and said that he would fight, and now the Confucian temple really followed the fight. Then he became a disciple of Wensheng's line, even more so than the brother. Under the eyelids of all the sages of the Confucian temple, Yuan Yangzu hid a fairy Yunlu, as if Yunlu was about to sacrifice the treasure of the town of Jiozhen Immortal Hall. That was fighting for life, not fighting. Still refused to give up and later provoked the Xiaoyuan dynasty? Not far from the city, Jiang Longxiang was beaten. It is said that just now, Ma Zhuoxin, the big disciple who also beat the Pei Cup, only used the way of martial arts to ask the boxer. It seems that Ma Zhuoxian has only been in the 9 realms for less than 20 years. As a result, he gave people a martial arts future that was expected to reach the top and then ascended to the sky. It was abruptly defeated. Can Ma Zhuoxian return to the 9 realms afterwards? Is a big question. In 3 games, the trainer, the scholar, and the pure martial artist, have they all fought? Fighting is really capable, but bad temper is really bad. The little heavenly master Longhushan said in surprise, "It's you." At that time, I met at the inn in the night ship entry city. At that time, Zhao Yaoguang could never imagine that he would meet Qin Shi, the hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword, if he met a green shirt casually. A leaf of duckweed returns to the sea, wherein life does not meet. Before going down the mountain, please help me out. It is a good lottery. If it is true, I will always meet noble people on my own trip. Just talking about the Confucian temple, there is Mr. Zhua who has heard of his name for a long time and has not seen him. There is also the famous hermit in front of him. As for that Aliang, forget it, not a noble person, a good brother who shares weal and woe. Qin Pingan smiled and said, It's me, I didn't expect to meet again so soon. It is estimated that the noble Huang Zi, who is full of moral energy in the mountains, could not even think of the shop assistant who sold things to them. It was Wu Shuangjiang at that time. Zhao Yaoguang beat the chief inspector, got up and apologized again. He smiled brightly and said, "Last time on the ferry the trail was offensive. Mr. Qin has a lot of it. Don't care about it. Mr. Qin really wants to care about it. When I went to Longhu Mountain, Xiao Dao would definitely have to move out a few jars of good wine, and Mr. Qin would go with them." Chen Pingan clasped his fists and smiled. "If you don't go to the Longhushan Heavenly Master's mansion when you travel to the Central Earth continent, wouldn't it be a waste of time? But if you say in advance, you won't be able to greet guests with drums and drums. The Five Thunders of Dragon and Tiger Mountain is a well-deserved authenticity in the world." Chen Pingan has been fascinated for a long time. He only hopes that next time he visits the Tianqi's mansion, Longhu Mountain can allow himself to read a few more books. Zhao Yaoguang was stunned. The sound of gongs and drums? How to say? Could it be that the Hermit Sama implied that he was tossing more lively and pompously? The point is that I am not a contemporary celestial master, so I don't want to be foolish. His own ancestor master is so strong, he looks younger than himself, standing on his fists and walking on his arms. Qin Pingan apologized when the little heavenly master didn't understand him, saying that he was nonsense, don't take it seriously. Lin Junbai had to explain to an unconscious friend around him. A Liang stole into Longhu Mountain once. The hospitality of your heavenly master's mansion? I heard that the battles are huge, the thundering methods are constant, and the gongs and drums are noisy. Zhao Yaoguang was stunned immediately and smiled. No, I really can't. Because of the relationship between Wenxing and old scholars, Longhushan is actually in the same line with Wenxing, and the relationship is not bad. As for Mr. Zhu's early sword development, it was a personal grievance between Jianxiu. Besides, the elder of the Heavenly Master Mansion, who was destined not to be a sword immortal in this life, later turned to peace of mind to practice thunder law, broke and stood up, because of a blessing in disguise. The Taoist heart is clear, the road is promising, and whenever he drinks with others, he does not shy away from his back then. In the Great Catastrophe, I like to take the initiative to mention the questioning sword with Zhu Jianxian. I always said that I had suffered more than 8 swords from the left and the right, and suffered a few more swords than any other sword embryo or a certain sword repairer. This is what a hard record. Between his looks, there is a heroic spirit that is glorious despite defeat. A few groups of people drinking and chatting on the side steps all have a similar impression at the moment. This young hidden official who returned to Howren's hometown looked good at talking, but it didn't mean it was easy to mess with. Among them was an old man who took a long sip of wine and glanced at the figure of the young man. He was still young with a sword back in his blue shirt. The old man couldn't help sighing, "It's nice to be young." Chen Pingan and the two crossed the threshold together, and after entering the Confucian temple, they happened to sit in the position of a liang. Knowing that a liang had traveled far, Chen Pingan gave up the idea of visiting Mrs. Qingshanshan. "I was planning to come to the door to apologize. After all, the shop has been under the guise of Qingshanshan Jiushui for many years. By the way, I wondered if I could buy a few bamboos with that lady. After all, the little bamboo forest next door to Mr. It started a few times. The old chef always urges the millet to miss so much every day." Chen Pingan, the master of the mountain, has a conscience overwhelmed. "I found that the table near me was empty, and all the fruits and drinks were swept away. Is this a robbery and runaway?" Lu Ji asked. "It's so troublesome. The Confucian temple doesn't care about you?" Chen Pingan shook his head and said, "I don't care, I have a sense of measure and I am in the rules." Qi Tingji joked. "The sword came out of Yuanyangzu and punched Auto Mountain. It was only a kick over the Parrot Island." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Sect Master Qi has a good literary talent." Lu Ji said, "Will Pei Cup trouble you?" If Pei Cup had to stand up for his disciple Ma Zhuoxian, Chen Pingan would certainly not be able to get the slightest advantage. Chen Pingan said, "Furthermore, the boat will naturally be straight when it reaches the bridge head. If it is not straight, just disembark and go ashore." Left and Right calmly said, "Ma Zhuoxian has a master and you also have a senior brother. What are you afraid of? Jun Qian's fist is not light." Chen Pingan turned his head and smiled. "Senior brother," asked the sword and sword. "If the husband knows, he will be very happy." No matter what the Great Wall of Jianqi, the senior only said that in the Middle-earth Divine Continent, he hadn't made a sword for too long. The left and right did not say anything about this, but just said, "About the Jiozhen Immortal Hall, Zhuolu Songzi has already apologized to me, and I hope you can go to Zhuolu County Academy for a few days and be responsible for the master of the Confucian scholars in the academy has made a brief battle. This is the advantage of having a husband and brothers. Qin Pingan doubted, Zhuolu Songzi has asked the wrong person, I might as well go there. He glanced around at Qin Ping and Qin Pingan immediately said, I will definitely go to Zhuolu to attend the class if I have the opportunity. The lecturer at the college will be exempted and I must refuse. Nodded left and right, stopped talking and began to close his eyes to rest. Lu Ji asked curiously, how old is that pei cup? Qin Pingan replied, if the official history books of the Duduan dynasty are not deceiving, they are not very old, less than 200 years old. Lu Ji said, that's more than 200 years old. Qin Pingan was speechless, what is the truth? Afterwards, Qin Pingan and Huolong asked about Zhang Shanfeng's current situation in their hearts, and they said that they were going to Luzhou and Beiju soon, and this time they would be a guest on Diffing. The real fire dragon smiled and said, good guest, your kid must go. The mountain kid, the realm has soared over the years and he can't stop it. This is not a long time ago, you just left the customs, you are visiting Baijulu this time. Zhou, you can definitely see him. Of course it's good for someone to be a guest. Baiyandifeng has a door-to-door reception. After all, Baiyandifeng is still poor. It won't be enough if you can't open the pot. But it's not a mountain with rich wealth and no confidence to speak. It's the same in Beiju Luzhou. The money is the hero has the courage to go to Aizhou where the mountains and plains are full of immortal money. He still has to keep his head down and talk to people. Huolong has always felt that his mountain friends are more ignorant of etiquette and thick-skinned because of their old age. They are all cultivating immortals on the mountain, and they are not doing business properly. Apart from being rich, they have not seen how high your cultivation level is. People, who are you with a bunch of bulging bastards? So every time you leave the customs, the old true person has to ask Yuan Lingyan and several of his descendants, if you have made new friends recently, can you invite them to visit the mountain? It's a pity that one is better than a fool, not understanding the true meaning. Qin Pingan was relieved to hear that Zhang Shanfeng had just broken through. After hesitating for a long time, he cautiously raised a mouth with the old real man, saying that he had touched Lu Daochun in Baidi City at Yuanyangzu. The old man wondered, Lu Daochun? Pin Dao had heard of this person, but wasn't he suppressed in Aquarius Island by Brother Zhao? When did it appear? Brother Zhao, did he have what's the matter? Why was Lu Daochun sneaked out? Is it because Lu Daochun's cultivation base is too high, or my brother, you slapped it in the early years, and you couldn't make a solid seal of the heavenly master in your hand? Zhao Tianlai smiled and replied, I don't know, it's estimated that after a long time, the celestial master's Yin Dao meaning has disappeared, not to mention that there was no ruthless hand. As for how Lu Daochun got to Yuanyangzu, it is even more unclear. I really want to repent and I have to be taken lightly by the hermit. On the way here, the two of them had negotiated and sold the kite ferry boat half sold and half delivered as if there was no such thing in the Imperial Library. The mysterious dynasty and Luapa Mountain are on the line, and there is some personal friendship between the two sides. In any case, half of this favor must be counted on the Yupan Shui head in the end, so the emperor was forced to come down. As the result came, Emperor Yuan Su not only gave a cross-continental ferry in vain, but the Xuanmi dynasty seemed to have to pay for the repair of the wind kite. Even Yu Pan Shui boarded the boat and left Parrot Island, still feeling a bit on credit? Well, your kid should tell you when to pay the money. If we don't ask, you won't say anything? You owe money like this in the world? In the end, there is still a face to say, but I am disrespectful and I have suffered it before? Yu Pan Shui shook his hand with the handle and rubbed his aging face, thinking that when he was a little girl in the Hakka family, Pei Chen looked very honest and honest. He was a well-mannered girl, so polite. Counting a child, if it weren't for an old scholar, it would be shameless and stubborn. That old valuable thing was almost never sent out. After a whirl, it will be successfully returned to the bag. How can Pei Chen, who is not greedy for money, share such a wealthy master? Yuan Su looked around and said for no reason, Grandpa Yu, it turns out that there are so few yellow objects in the outer world. At home, in the palace, it's different. As far as he can remember, when he thinks of that side, the young emperor's mind is full of yellow objects, and the high roof ridges can't be seen at a glance. They are all yellow. The clothes he wears, the cushions on his hips, the dishes on the table, and the sedan chair swaying between the high walls on both sides are all yellow. It seems that there is only one color in the world. Other colors, for example, there is a library in the palace which is black. There are many precious books that young people will not touch for a lifetime, but outsiders will never see it. As for the color of the generals, the color of the body is similar to that of a few circles of streams. They come and go in his house every day and the cycle is repeated. There are often old people speaking childish words and young people speaking unpredictable words. And then he sat on that chair, didn't know how to pretend to understand, and when he encountered something big at a loss, he glanced at Fatty Yu. For the supreme emperor of the mystic dynasty, many gray-haired old civil servants had more or less hinted a teenager with words when Fatty Yu was not around. Yuanzhou actually understood it but pretended not to understand. Some old people are really good for him, and some are thinking that Yu Panshui left the court so many official positions will move forward. But Yuan Su didn't pay any attention, and at most occasionally cooperated with the elderly, gritted his teeth or slightly red eyes. In fact, it was very troublesome. At last, he reminded the eunuchs around him to talk to Grandpa Yu when he turned his head back to talk to Grandpa Yu, and don't forget his little actions when they came to the scene. What is it and what good is it for him? Yu Panshui would not be the emperor, and the Xuanmi dynasty was also destined to be unable to lack the backbone of the Yu family. In that case he is a fart eldest child, don't mess around. The old apricot tree in the palace, which has lived for 700 to 800 years, is said to have been planted by a founding emperor himself. In autumn, the tree will be covered with golden leaves and leaves every year. Green leaves every year? The deep-rooted Zhongtu Yu family is evergreen without deciduous leaves. Yu Panshui rarely looked kind, touched the young man's head and whispered, "It will be hard to be the master." The boy tilted his head and complained, "The emperor dares to touch his head." Yu Panshui laughed and patted the face of the young man. "Grandpa Yu is in a good mood to accompany you on this trip, so whoever the queen will be in the future, you can choose for yourself in the future. It doesn't matter if you have the surname Yu." Yuan Yu stamped his feet and said, "I heard that Yu Yufu and Yu Qingqing, these two best-looking sisters, you have their own hearts. Who can I pick?" "Ah?" Yu Panshui smiled and said, "Qingqing's girl is interested in Lin Junbai. I know. As for the husband, I heard that with the hermit. I asked him twice at the Great Wall of Jianxi. Do you understand?" Yuan Yu slapped his boxing hands and exclaimed sincerely, "Sister Huahu, oh no, it's a sister-in-law. It's not right, it's a sister-in-law with a good eye." Yu Panshui slapped the little boy into a daze. "Panshui County is over there." A young scholar full of shabby air found an ascending realm great monk who was recovering from his wounds. Qinggong Taibao Jinghao, even if he was injured on the left and right, still did not leave, as if waiting for justice from the Confucian temple. The one who blocked the road and ran away and then apologized was the first monk who ran back to the house to become the door afterwards. It's just a jade realm, and it's not ashamed to take care of the nursing home for an ascending monk. Most of the rest of the mountain helpers were scattered by birds and beasts. The good name is that they dare not delay the rest of the ancestor Jing. It's just that the jade cultivator fell to the ground with a flower in front of his eyes. Before fainting, I only vaguely saw a blue shirt, passing by myself. This courtyard is quiet, and a cluster of emerald green plantains is as fat as dripping water. Jing Hao walked out of the house and looked at the young scholar standing in the courtyard. Before leaving the house, Lu Qiqing took out a piece of white cloud paper unique to Baidi City, wrote an invitation letter on it and put it on the table. Of course, it was to invite the previous 8 money girl who didn't know her name or name to visit the Lioli Pavilion in Baidi City to enjoy the scenery when she had time. Her brother Lu would definitely welcome her by sweeping the couch. Li Huai was lying at the table at the time, shook his head as he watched and took the courage to persuade the senior Lu, the wording in the letter, "Don't be so blunt, unspoken and not implicit enough." While waiting for the ferry on the shore, Lu Qiqing was not surprised that Chen Pingan disappeared out of thin air. "Come and go in a hurry, you are busy." Taoist Nen sneered and said, "You are young and work hard and you don't know what to do all day long." Li Huai complained, "I said this to my brother in front of you, don't you give me face, Lao Nen. If you are so mixed up, you want eat and drink spicy." Taoist Nen immediately bowed his head and smiled and spoke in a low voice and said in one go, "Master, I have changed my way to praise Chen Pingana's responsibility. There is something in the words." Gu Qingsong came swiftly against the wind, his figure crashed to the ground, the wind was violent, and there were many people who were stumbling over the trainers waiting for the ferry at the ferry. Just waiting to see the person's face clearly, they all pretended to be traveling along the water, and quickly moved away, hiding far away. Lao Zhouzi looked around and still felt that only the awe-inspiring Taoist person was qualified to have a chat with himself. As for the Baidi City Lu Daochun, what kind of fancy, why not just marry Zhang as a lady-centered? Gu Qingsong hurriedly asked, "Friend Nin, where is the kid? Where is the slippery soul?" When Taoist Nen heard this he felt refreshed and said in a pleasant manner, "With this fellow, Gu Daoyu, you said that boy, if one is not paying attention he will be gone." God knows where to go. If you have something to do with him, I can help with the conversation. Gu Qingsong cursed, what a kid, hiding from himself? Li Baoping looked at the old man who was talking increasingly ugly. Gu Qingsong noticed her gaze, he stared, but he endured it. After all, she was from a little girl's family and she looked really pleasing to the eye. Such a spirited girl is not common, so this old Josie only played after less than a success. He said, look at what? Gu Qingsong felt a little bit when he said something. I always feel like I missed something important but I can't remember. Close at hand, fishing for the moon in the water is generally futile. Lu Qiqing couldn't help but screamed and he stopped talking. He just changed his mind and didn't dare to remind him, so he learned from the old brother Long once. His mother, when I return to Panshui County, I will ask Brother Longbow for advice on the supernatural power of water. Li Baoping shifted his gaze and called out to Brother. It turned out that there was a scholar in Russian. Li Shixing. Gu Qingsong or xianxia was dull and speechless. Some things he has guesses but he dare not think about it. If you get it right, then the scholar you had previously worked with will be half of your master's brother. Bai Yujing is the head teacher, accepts apprentices on behalf of the teacher, and teaches two younger brothers, Yu Dou and Lu Shen. Li Shixing smiled and asked, Xianxia, what did you just say? Gu Qingsong was speechless. Li Baoping said, Brother, senior has this temper, it's nothing. Li Shixing turned his head and nodded with a smile with little treasure bottle. As for the smile to Gu Qingsong just now and the kind smile to Li Baoping, of course they are worlds apart. Li Huai saluted honestly, I have seen Mr. Li. Li Shixing smiled and said, Li Huai, as long as you don't deliberately think about it, you will be fine. Li Huai was confused and nodded. It doesn't matter if you don't understand, just do it. He is Li Baoping's elder brother, a scholar, and a fellow countryman, so he can't hurt himself. Outside of the book, there are thousands of truths under the world, but in fact we firmly grasp one or two. It is more useful to know the truth than to remember the truth in your head. Li Shixing said with his heart to the fairy, there is a reason to remove some of your thoughts before. It is useless to say more about the truth. Now that the matter is over, I will not repeat the trick, but I will encounter it later. My sister, am going to wrong you and make a detour. Gu Qingsong straightened his waist and said respectfully, don't be wronged. How can you be wronged? Lao Zhozi is not afraid of this person's identity, but sincerely respects this person. If you want to be scared when you walk around the world, you can just have a hard fist. But if you want to be respected, especially if a few people in the world are willing to respect it, it is still impossible to rely on Taoism to be high. This is also the reason why the old Zhozi is willing to take a high look to the younger generation of monks, and to Lu Jinglong of the Taihui sword sect of Luzhou in northern Zhu, alone. Otherwise, even if the second uncle Yu Dou, known as the Invincible, stood here, Gu Qingsong asked himself, just as uneasy. Even Gu Qingsong had already prepared a draft. When did he go to Bai Yujing in the Qingming world, and when he met Yu Dou he had to ask him a question in the first sentence. The second uncle went to the catch and release pavilion. Now why don't you just drop by and fight with Qin Qing? Is it too respectful of the old sword repairman, or is it impossible to fight? Lao Zhozi hit the chief inspector. The scholar also made a fuss. Gu Qingsong said goodbye, but instead of Yufeng leaving the ferry, he threw a leaf into the water, turning it into a flat boat and going downstream with the water. Since I can't see Qin Pingyan, I hurry to accompany Mrs. Gue, lest she be unhappy? Li Shixing walked to Li Baoping and said softly, I was at the house before and I was messing around, please pay attention later. Li Baoping said, there is a little uncle here, what am I afraid of? Li Shixing smiled and said, yes, it doesn't matter whether the eldest brother is there anyway. Li Baoping smiled and narrowed his eyes. Lu Qiqing was envious. If he was such a big brother, let alone the awe-inspiring world, he could lie down and wander around in the Qingming world. Li Shixing turned his head and asked, Pavilion Master Lu, shall we talk? Lu Qiqing's heartstrings were tense and he said with a dazed expression, where is my brother in Panshui County? Why should I lead the way for Mr. Li? Don't talk to the master teacher if you are killed. If you want to talk, just find your senior brother. When you arrive in Panshui County you can talk to you. Chess, Taoism, longevity, and knowledge of the 14 realms and 15 realms are all casual. Li Shixing smiled and said, yes. It's just that Lu Qiqing was dragged away, crossing an extremely long arc, and fell directly from the side of Parrot Island into a house in Panshui County. Lu Qiqing, who fell heavily to the ground, simply lay on the ground in a daze. Li Shixing then heard a heartfelt voice and replied with heartfelt words, okay, 100 years later in Baidi City in Baiyujing, play a game with Mr. Zheng. Then Li Shixing smiled and looked at the tender Taoist who didn't follow the rules. The Taoist then regretted his intestines, so he shouldn't be absolutely wrong and shouldn't eavesdrop on this conversation. Not everyone can say this to Zheng Zhuzhong. For things like on the Great Wall of Jianxi, someone said to ask Qin about the sword and then Qin agreed. It's almost like this. As for who, is it true that Qin Tao Ting makes a difference? Of course not, they were all hacked to death with a few random swords and it was over. Li Shixing smiled and said, it's easy to write characters and difficult to write. Tao Ting Taoist fellows still need to be cautious. Li Huai knew it must be the old Nen, who was around him again, hitting Taoist Nen's ribs with an elbow and whispered, be more regular. Taoist Nen said angrily, be reasonable and reasonable. You have to be more disciplined. Li Shixing smiled. The tender Taoist is relieved. When the ferry stopped and a group of people boarded the ferry, the Taoist Nen stood beside Li Huai honestly, feeling that he was still standing next to his son and felt more comfortable. Earlier, Beidasheng Han Xiao Se Yufeng rushed to Parrot Island, visited Baozhai, and bought a mountain treasure suitable for ghost practice. The price is not cheap, the things are good, but they are too expensive to wait for her to arrive. Has not been able to sell. Furthermore, in the vicinity of the Confucian temple, the monk openly bought a ghost repair tool, which was a bit out of date and taboo. However, Han Xiaosui glanced at the thing and bought it again, but no one thought it was a bit weird. The sister of the city lord of Baidi City was a well-known confounder with Lu Qi and Qinggong Taibao. Jianghu is a way of cultivation with a high realm, many spells and a wide range of magical powers. As long as it is not a battle of great disparity, if one party has endless methods and learns from the Taoism, it will naturally take advantage. It's just that compared to the turmoil surrounding the Confucian temple, Han Xiao's handwriting is like a very small water drift, completely unnoticeable. Han Kozii returned to the house in Panshui County and threw the object to Guken, who was still playing music alone, and asked, I can't put the book in Jianghu? Guken shook his head and smiled, behave and show it to yourself. Han Xiaosa didn't even feel that there was any contradiction in this statement. The fanatic Guken in the eyes of others at this moment in Han Xiaosa's eyes, is beautiful jade. Guken put away the chess pieces on the chessboard, not to mention the slowness of playing chess, even slower to get the pieces together, and Han Xiaosa was anxious for him. Then suddenly a pink robe fell from the sky. After falling to the ground, Lu Qiqing began to pretend to be dead, and Han Xiaosi glanced outside the room. Yeah, don't you ask your brother to complain this time? Lu Qiqing bored and said, leave me alone, enjoy the scenery. In a courtyard elsewhere in the house, Zheng Zhuzhong was standing under the eaves, and his eldest disciple Fu Su stood aside. Zheng Zhuzhong smiled and said, the moon is faint and windy and the foundation is rainy. The situation in the world is getting brighter. Instead of going to the riverside to participate in that meeting, Zheng Zhuzhong will show more context than going to the riverside. Zheng Zhuzhong glanced at the sky, relaxed a bit. Fu Su said, Master, I want to learn from Dong Sanging and travel through the wild world alone. It may take at least 100 years. The implication was that he didn't care about the layout of the master and Baidi City, and he used the sword alone to practice cultivation. As for the next collision between the two worlds, he will only look at the situation. Zheng Zhuzhong nodded and said, why not? Good anglers seek pleasure, bad anglers seek fish. In the wild world, Jinshui City quietly changed its owner. It was Xuanhu, the city owner of the fairy girl, willingly, and the matter was extremely hidden. Beidasheng Zheng is in the middle. It is equal to the vast world, the next city first. Chen Pingan said with sorrow, why didn't the senior say it earlier, otherwise even if the junior is rolling he will have to buy 2 sets with Mr. Shiping. The true man Huolong got up immediately and went to find Jing Shengsiping. Chen Pingan was frightened and dared not stop. The real fire dragon walked out of the Confucian temple and quickly followed Shiping, hooked his shoulders, said that Chen Pingan, the boy, temporarily regretted it, felt that he had a rare opportunity. Not enough, good boy. The lion opened his mouth and asked you for 3 sets in one breath. There were 5 sets of hand-copied scriptures at the beginning. It was a poor way of talking or arguing, to persuade the kid to be content and not to be too troublesome to Mr. Shiping. Jing Shengsiping gently pushed the old man's hand away and smiled, then I will copy 2 more sets. The price negotiated before will remain the same. Only the 2 extra sets will be counted as a small sum of money. The real fire dragon smiled, strode back to the Confucian temple, and when he reached the steps he immediately slowed down, and then passed the threshold with a long time. After sitting down he said to Chen Pingan, it's settled, discuss the matter with Mr. Shiping. Poor Dao can be said to be sold out of old faces, so I can help you ask for more. Chen Pingan smiled awkwardly. What else could he do, nodding his head in thanks. The real fire dragon seemed to remember something and said, but the extra set is worth a Gaiyukian. At first glance, the price seems to be a bit more expensive, but you guys need to know that on the Confucian Temple, Mr. Sheeping, but people who have never socialized with anyone, so many sages of the Confucian Temple, are equally hard to ask for, so I have never heard of any set of Shiping true works in the Hauran world. You make a lot of money for a good reign. If you don't, am willing to pay for this money, but the poor road will help you out? Qin Pingan said, no need. Although I just spent a lot of money at the Baozhai at Parrot Island, I bought a ferry with the Xuanmi dynasty. I ran out my savings and owed a debt, but it's a reign. This money is still affordable for juniors who gritted their teeth. The real fire dragon raised his eyebrows. The ferry, the transcontinental ferry, right? Isn't it the wind kite that I've been thinking about for hundreds of years and lying on the top of the mountain but can't afford it? Qin Pingan bit his head and said, Mister, you didn't say the name of the ferry. The real fire dragon nodded. It's a good thing. What's the relationship between Pitafeng and Luopishan? It's your ferry, which means you are poor. In the future, your kid will expand your business and reach the door of Pitafeng and then help. It would be even better to build a xianxia ferry, and to avoid a ferry expense. It's a trivial matter. I will say hello to you, Xiao Fatty, when I look back. Feng Yuan will go from Middle Earth to Aquarius Island. All the expenses of don't count yours. It's a cryptic dynasty. You Xiao Fatty is famous for his pockets and he cares about this drizzle with you. What is it like? It's just that you Pan Shui, who traveled far away from the body and participated in the discussion at the Confucian Temple, felt that things were not good for no reason. As expected, the hearty laugh of the real fire dragon sounded in the lake of mind. Brother Yu Pan Shui smiled dryly. Brother Huolong, what's the matter? The real fire dragon complained. You brother, you don't pay attention to it. You used to be a poor person who misunderstood, and you will be regarded as a good brother of Yibo Yintian. Yu Pan Shui raised his hand and wiped the fine sweat on his forehead that was forced out of him forcibly. Brother Huolong, what do you say? What's wrong with my brother? I can correct it immediately. Brothers? Let's pull it down. Before this Confucian Temple discussion, the two of us had never met before. The true man Huolong chatted with the supreme emperor of the mysterious dynasty a few words of justice. Yu Pan Shui chicks pecks at the rice, listening to the teachings, and if there are any changes they will be encouraged. In the end, the real Huolong smiled and turned his head to tell Qin Pingan that the matter was done. Although it was the first time to meet and chat, Yu Pan Shui was surprisingly easy to talk and was very reasonable. It's okay for the old man not to turn his head. After turning his head, Yu Pan Shui became more sure of guessing in his heart. The old fat man was very sad in his heart, his eyes were dull and he stared at Qin Pingan. What a childish and fair-minded hermit, good best. Now the Xianmi dynasty had to help the Fengyuan ferry that had been repaired all the way to the Nujiashan ferry in Luopa Mountain. Just catch us Xianmi and Lao Yu, squeeze the wool hard but squeeze hard. In the future I will take the initiative to visit Yu Pan Shui to discuss business, and I will give your last name. Qin Pingan did not dare to argue with Yu Pan Shui's heartfelt voice. Sai, what should I do? Wait until the old real person is no longer around, and then explain it clearly with the Yu family leader. Mrs. Dandin suddenly took the initiative to find Qin Pingan and asked in a soft voice, I heard that one of Bai Yes fairy sword is too white, and one of the sword points falls in your hands? Qin Pingan didn't do anything to the new co-master of land and water transportation in the world. He turned slightly to the side facing the woman and nodded and said, Senior Qingzhong, it is true. Madame Tundun hesitated for a moment and said straightforwardly, Can you let me see it? The monk at the top of the mountain, Hauran, actually knew what was written on the gate of Lush Viking. Everyone knows that this bloated fat woman admires the most proud Bai Yi in the world. Lu Ji quickly raised his head and drank a pot of wine, put the pot in his sleeve, took the pot of wine from Mrs. Qingshan, lifted the mud seal, sniffed and said, It smells more fragrant. Mrs. Qingshan asked, I heard that Mr. Lu is a Chinese native? Lu Ji said calmly, You think it is, but I think it is not anyway. Lu Ji put the hip flask in his hand on the steps. The beautiful woman around her is good-looking, but she can't speak. Mrs. Qing Shinshan smiled and said, I have a direct disciple named Chun Qing, a young girl who wants to learn swordsmanship with Mr. Lu. I wonder if Mr. Lu is willing to agree. Lu Ji said, Dare to go to the wild world to kill demons and practice swords? Mrs. Qing Shinshan nodded and said, Dare. Lu Ji picked up the pot of wine at his feet and asked, What is the aptitude of the pure youth? I can't teach it if it's too bad. Mrs. Qingshan thought for a while. No matter what you study, you can be considered very good with pure talent. Lu Ji asked, how is it better than our hidden officials? Mrs. Qingshan said helplessly, Mr. Lu asks, so how can we talk? Lu Ji said, I can promise to accept disciples. As a reward it is very simple. I heard that the bamboos on Qingshan Mountain are good. Madam will send a few trees to Luapa Mountain. I heard Qin Pingan said that there is a Piyun Mountain near my hometown. In the place there is a Shanjun surnamed Wei who likes to grow bamboo the most. Mrs. Qingshan agreed and said with a smile, the surname is Wei Mingbo. Speaking of Qin Pingan helping Zhuhai Dong Tian selling wine at Jianxi Great Wall, she was actually willing to give away a few green bamboos for nothing. It's just that the young hermit has never spoken herself, she can't go pole to give things. Lu Ji said, Madam, don't think too much, I don't have a leg with Qin Pingan. It's just that when I left Upside Down Mountain and killed monsters at sea, Qin Pingan gave me half of the credit. Since I didn't consider it as an offering to Luapa Mountain, I always owed it. With this account, it happened that the wife delivered it to the door by herself. I taught the sword and paid the favor by the way. Mrs. Qingshan nodded, took a closer look at Lu Ji and smiled. No wonder that person thinks Mr. Lu looks good. I think so now. Lu Ji laughed. Who is that person? Tingji left and right? It can't be Qin Pingan, right? Mrs. Qingshan shook her head and said softly, it's really difficult to chat with Mr. Lu. Lu Ji took a sip of wine and glanced at the beautiful woman next to her. I think it's harder to pretend to dislike someone. Mrs. Qingshan asked, what about Mr. Lu? What about it? Lu Ji shook his head. No, it's not easy to practice swordsmanship, so why bother to ask for hardship? In her hometown there are too many men and women. Because of parting, teaching the one who survived, the sadness will not be relieved for a lifetime. So the price given by Mrs. Qingshan made Qin Pingan feel that he was really daring to hit a swollen face and fill a fat man. Looking at the young hidden official who didn't say a word in front of him, he was dumb? She was silent for a moment deliberately and smiled. Luapashan can pay on credit, but the interest is calculated. But Qin Pingan still didn't dare to agree. A bamboo is hundreds of gods' money. Guyuqian Gayuqian is not really rainy in the sky, and it can really become money when it falls in his hands. Especially when he heard that there was interest, Qin Pingan was particularly guilty. On this trip, Parachao Baozhai would spend a lot of money. Then he bought a fairy kite with Xianmi. At this moment, if he buys these bamboos, Qin Pingan must worry that the god of wealth, Wei Wenlong, will rebel. Why, as a mountain owner, I finally did not become the shopkeeper, and when I went out, I started to spend my money. Mrs. Qingshan smiled and said, interest can be counted on someone. He owes Zhuhai Dongtian a lot of wine money. I believe Mr. Qin knows a lot about these bamboos. The bamboo transplanted from Qingshan God only needs to be on the mountain. If the fairy is planted and managed properly, every bamboo will be a cash cow. It is not too much to say that it is a small cornucopia. Qin Pingan immediately straightened his waist. The juniors are fine. I bought it. It's only on credit and no interest is needed. The big deal is that on the side of Luapa Mountain I didn't mention it with Wei Wenlong. When did I earn some private money by relying on Baozhai and pay the debts by myself? Whenever I can't help it I will pull out Chui Dongshan. She smiled and said, looking back I will send someone to Luapa Mountain. Qin Pingan said, if you dare not bother your wife so much, you can go directly to the Yu family of the Xianmi dynasty, and there will be a ferry across the continent to the mountain of the younger generation. Mrs. Qingshan is about to return to the Confucian temple. I never thought that Qin Pingan would continue to ask. Yes, madam, there are also mangosteen and Jichuan bamboo, Zifu born cloud bamboo, Taozhan fishing bamboo. What are the prices? She stopped and smiled and said, Mr. Chen's business experience is indeed very good. Why not just owe the entire Zhuhai cave sky on credit? It is all available for negotiation. Qin Pingan immediately clasped his fists and apologized. The younger generation will not delay madam's discussion. They are all poor, otherwise I met this ethereal lady Qingshan. Qin Pingan would only stay away. Talking about money is too vulgar, and there is nothing to talk about without money. She suddenly changed her mind and sat back on the steps. Qin Pingan had to sit aside. There was a few Lu Ji between the two figures. Looking into the distance she asked softly, Qin Pingan, where is the Great Wall of Jianxi? Qin Pingan thought for a while and replied, according to Lin Junbai, it is a place where people can forget their lives. She asked again, I want to know what you think. The young people around him were all scholars, and they were all foreigners from the Great Wall of Jianxi. but they could all be regarded as hometown by Jianxia over there. Chen Pingan scratched his head and didn't say a word, just seeing that Mrs. Qingshanshan didn't want to leave until the answer, so he borrowed Su Yuanxia's saying. It is not a place to hide dirt but a place of revenge. Anyway, this is what Chen Pingan said. As for the other answer that Chen Pingan didn't say, there is nothing to say to outsiders. Both myself and my beloved woman were still young girls. Ning Yao came to him from the Great Wall of Jinchi. He went to Jinchi Great Wall to see Ning Yao. Aquarius Island in the dark. The egret crossing on Xinjiang Mountain was drizzling, the road was soft and the night breeze was cool. 2 people when they come and 3 people when they go. A scholar in a green shirt, a teenager in white with a mole on his forehead, there was a young girl with sharp eyes around her, Ting curled up, and she was helping the young man in white with an umbrella. She occasionally has a pair of smart eyes and a look of pain flashes. At this time, the boy in white will gently hold the umbrella handle. Then the girl's eyes will immediately regain her clarity, a pair of moisturized eyes, occasional emotions like spring grass growing in a pond, clear and shallow, and see the bottom. This is the end of Tianhuan's bet with Cui Dongshan. The bet is that he doesn't need Tianhuan and Chief Zhou to lead the red line, he only needs to let him travel through her heart. Before that, he will give her a few days, close the door with her, set up the obstacles in the small world. Cui Dongshan's only requirement is that the sedan chair don't move. If you break the oath, there will be no more land in the world. Jiang Shangzhen said with emotion, Peanuts, what a good name. Brother Cui is really the master of the mountain. Cui Dongshan said solemnly, of course the name is very interesting, but he doesn't even have half the skill of my husband. The girl looked resentful, she didn't think the name was so good and rustic. She only knows that she has amnesia and can't remember anything, and the most troublesome thing is to forget all the things of yesterday. As for the 2 around him, one is her brother, and the other is the father of her fiancé, who is married by her parents. That's right, the man in the blue shirt looks young, but he has frost and snow on his temples. His true age is definitely not young, but he doesn't appear old. Thinking about it again, if his fiancé looks a bit like his father, it is probably not too bad. Both of them came to Xinjiang Mountain and an old to ask for a panacea, just to cure her loss of soul. They never thought they ate closed doors at the foot of the mountain, and they didn't even see the face of the fairy on the mountain. A lot of money was wasted and the family was almost emptied. Jiang Shangzhen asked heartily, when did you create another porcelain? Even your husband and I should keep it secret? Cui Dongshan grinned and said, isn't I tossing a brother gal before? I just wanted to find him a companion. This is not a coincidence, it just comes in handy. It's not because I met Tianhuan, I almost forgot about it. Jiang Shangzhen turned his head, slowed down with an unprecedented serious expression on his face, and wanted to seek an exact answer with Cui Dongshan. Cui Dongshan sighed and nodded, I know the severity. Since the husband is back, there will be a husband in front of him in the future, so naturally I don't need to do this. Jiang Shangzhen was relieved, laughed and said, that's good. Otherwise, I don't want the chief position and I will stay far away from Luapa Mountain. Cui Dongshan patted Jiang Shangzhen on the shoulder, I'm not a brother who has been separated for many years, I can't say such heartwarming words at all. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, which one of our brothers are with whom? Cui Dongshan turned his head and said, Peanuts, in the future when you arrive at Luapa Mountain, you will work for a few years. When the time is right, you will be responsible for collecting and summarizing information. From now on, you may also be responsible for the Shanshui Dibao and Jinghua Shuiyue. Very competent, your boss, only one, of course it is me, your half-brother. The girl nodded and asked, my surname is Cui too? Cui Dongshan's eyes called a kindness and he touched the girl's head, I can guess all of this? The small head has melon seeds, the aura is so aura, it's about to catch up with the millet grains. Jiang Shangzhen squinted and nodded, yes. Cui Dongshan shook his head, flipping his palms, miles? The girl was a little embarrassed, thinking that the 2 men next to her were talking like this, making it strange to hear. Fortunately, walking the night at night, I can't meet anyone. So she started to change the subject. Brother, is that a martial art? Well, it must be. It is the most quaint place in the world. After you go, you will definitely like it. I don't understand intelligence or something. If you don't understand, you will learn. The Luapa Mountain does not raise idlers. You can't learn, you have to sell cakes in Qilong Alley for the rest of your life. But you are my sister, wherever you can be stupid, you will surely learn. She still wants to talk, but in her heart she thinks selling pastries is good. Cui Dongshan knocked on a chestnut and said, don't always interrupt. Also, remember, if there is an old the mountain called Changming who wants to talk to you about information, You should follow her a little bit and just look at it. That sister, she is older and has a bad temper. The money bags in our house, we two brothers and sisters don't be familiar with her." She nodded vigorously. "I see." Cui Dongshan smiled and stroked her head. "Lupashan's Hangla lives for a long time. From now on, Peanuts and the little dumb that Pei Chen picks up will be her right hand. One is cruel, the other is cruel. It will be the two shadows hiding in the shade of Luapa Mountain, working hard and only doing dirty work. The premise is of course that the husband is willing to agree to this matter. This is an unwritten rule of Luapa Mountain. No one has to violate their will, everything is easy to discuss. Cui Dongshan hopes that this rule can last for hundreds of thousands of years on Luapa Mountain. When the break is constant, the chaos will arise. When you do not kill, the big thief will be the one." Jiang Shangzhen said with a heartfelt smile, "On this matter, I will help you talk to Chen Pingan. If it doesn't make sense once, just say it a few more times until it bothers him." When the chief of the week called Chen Pingan by his first name, he must have been speaking seriously. For example, when it comes to the Uwafudi and Fox country, the direction of Luapa Mountain is correct, but there are many flaws. It's just that I haven't found the seat that the chief enshrines at that time, so I didn't rush to check the omission. Besides, there are some small truths, it is better to say it early than late, because it can be more targeted and discuss the matter, correcting small mistakes and turning them into bigger ones. The three of them walked to the ferry port and waited for the ferry. At night there were few monks on the shore. Most of them glanced at the three and then stopped watching. Cui Dongshan blinked and asked with a smile, "Chief Shou, such a beautiful friend and beautiful woman, you are so talented, you have no poetry? Maybe I am a little inspired." Jiang Shangzhen coughed, paced slowly under the umbrella at the ferry, pondered for a moment, his eyes lit up and he was seeing a swing outside the wall, echoing with thin waists, slim and slender and Yunping. The Chuckle Lang looked up and he called out the wall outside the wall. "Name." Cui Dongshan gave a thumbs up. "It's absolutely devastating." The girl suddenly raised her hand, pressing the back of her hand against her forehead. For no reason, remembered a series of past events. Her family was born in a local prefecture in a small vassal country. Her father was full of poems, and her mother was a lady of the family. She was a good match for others to admire. Her father had a smooth sailing in the early years. Transferred to the place to serve as the county judge and promoted to the prefecture. It's just that the Huahai is ups and downs, was framed by colleagues, lost the official and returned to his hometown, and served as the lecturer of the college in his hometown of Fenyang. I never thought that my father would be placed in the center of the officialdom and pressured the local government. He was so crowded that he could not stay in the academy and died in depression. Therefore his family was in decline, not as good as every year. Even the tired brother couldn't participate in the imperial examination, so he had to take refuge away from his hometown and find a mountain sect to rely on. After getting the family letter, as soon as she heard that she was suffering from loss of soul disorder, she immediately worked hard, went home and found her, and then relying on the future husband-in-law and his father's way, the three of them traveled thousands of miles together and finally got here. For the fairy mountain of the bull ears on the continent, we must find a respected old immortal master with the title of Moving Mountain Ancestor, on the mountain. The girl couldn't cry, turned her head and said, "Brother?" Cui Dongshan rolled his eyes and said, "Shut up, don't always bother me, the frozen bird must be silent." The girl was silent for a moment. Cui Dongshan squatted on the shore, and the girl just bends over and holds an umbrella, and when she hears this elder brother who is dependent on each other, she seems to be reciting an immortal poem on her own. The emperor is in the earthquake Long Dezichun. The immortal visits Changchun Palace and rides a white dragon without a cloud. It is easy to find immortals in Dongshan, but it is really difficult to find in Beihai. People who make up the sky and repair the moon want to be romantic through the ages. But with the South China Sea rising green, brewing longevity wine. Mr. Weiyuan paid frequent visits and asked Xianxia more. Jiang Shangzhen sighed and said, "Brother Siu's poems and essays are filled with celestial spirits. For a mundane master like me, I must kneel and listen." Cui Dongshan patted his palms, stood up, took a step back and then hit Jiang Shangzhen's knees with a kick. The two began to push, play and squabble, screaming, fisting, unhappy or not heavy. The girl only felt that this scene seemed to be sentimental. She seemed to be less afraid of the Luapa mountain for a while. Jiang Shangzhen raised his head and looked towards the night. After the drizzle stopped, Yun Kaiwei gradually came. "Thank you for pitying me, I can't bear it tonight. Mist and mist are all good signs just on the mountain, not under the mountain. The white man with both temples, holding an umbrella and looking at the deep night with gentle eyes, murmured, "Life is not enough, there is already a qing and he still wants to live long." The girl felt that the man's words were much better than the previous poem. She looked at the white-clothed boy timidly and whispered, "Brother?" Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Don't worry, he is a famous lover. It seems that in that Beiju Luzhou many mountain fairies and martial arts heroines have never wrongly paid their bodies, but they have already wrongly paid their true hearts." The fairy stopped ashore. From the size of a mustard seed far away in the sky, it became the behemoth in front of her was shocked by the girl Peanut. It turned out that this was the Xianxia fairy. She looked back at the Qingwu peak of Xingyang mountain. The girl remembered that her brother had to travel through mountains and rivers to heal herself, and had to endure hardships and money. She still couldn't go up the mountain. She couldn't help but feel resentful. What is the Xingyang mountain of the leader of the immortal family of one continent? What is the ancestor of moving mountains invincible all over the continent? Cui Dongshan waved his hand, "Go home." Near the Confucian temple on this day, a middle-aged Taoist priest took a child who had left his hometown. "He stayed here last night," he shouted the child from the tent. Then one child and one child sat together by the water. Dazed and dozing off, the Taoist priest was not in a hurry to let the child learn to do his own homework. In fact, the child was just sitting on the sidelines. This Taoist from Jingwei Temple folded his hands on his abdomen and asked with a soft smile, "Jing Xiao, have you ever heard a word, don't drink Mao Shirjiu so drunk?" Among the Taoist cheats of Baiyujing under the Qingming world, there is a great book of high reality called Jing Xiao de Lei Lang Book. A child named Wu Jingxiao stretched out his hand and patted his mouth. "I haven't heard of it. I don't know when Mao Shiryu sure is." This made many of the scripts of the Taoist priest useless. His name is Zhao Wenmin. The Taoist Song Xue is a heavenly monarch of the Taoist school of the Middle Earth. Zhao Wenmin's master is one of the 6 progeny of Fu Lu Yuxuan. Before he went to the mountain, Zhao Wenmin had been in Confucianism for generations. He was even more a juvenile prodigy. He was proud of the imperial examination. Before he was a weak crown, he served as an editor and repair officer of the Imperial Academy. Later, he met a lame veteran who claimed to be a scumbag in the market. "I have encountered several opportunities for the immortal family, and finally entered the Jingwei Guan, practicing Taoism, and the years have been long." 300 years ago, the master left his mundane position and devoted himself to practicing. He succeeded as the master and presided over the overall situation. Later, it was Zhao Wenmin who mistakenly thought that the master who was in retreat in the back mountain did not know that the master had died in Nanpasua Chao until a news came back to Taoist temple. Jingweiguan is the first-rate sect of Zhongtu Shenzhou. Although it is not the top sect, it is not comparable to ordinary sections. Zhao Wenmin breathed slowly, and if there was an upper 5-level Qi trainer by the side, you would find that the Taoist Sangsu's breaths were actually fast refining water transport, but every time it condensed into strands the water transportation will be returned to the river one by one, as if the Taoist practice is just the process of refining, not the result. Zhao Wenmin said, "Jing Xiao, our Taoist cultivators, when we do morning classes, most of them are in Mao because at this moment the Yang Qi is rising, the Yin Qi has not moved, the food has not entered, and the blood have not been disordered. Regardless of whether you can talk with ducks or not, there are some truths. Maybe the elders talk too much, the children will be affected by the ears, silently remember them and only wait for the day to resuscitate." The child was very sleepy and said, "Well, homework, I don't know yet. The school endorses the book. If you don't remember well, then you will get the master's board. Becoming a Taoist priest, you still have school work." Zhao Wenmin smiled and nodded and said, "The one who does homework learns from one's own merits, understands the true nature of oneself, and cultivates one's own way is of course important. It's where the gateway is. But don't worry, it's not too late to go up the mountain to practice." The child is even more sleepy. Zhao Wenmin smiled and said, "It's not my turn to play the board, you are now my junior, brother." I didn't tell the truth. In fact, according to the genealogy, he was his little uncle. The master of Jingwei Temple is afraid of scaring children. Don't look at the child sniffles and sniffles often, but he's actually a ghost. The child wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "Huh? You're a lot of age. You must be at least 40 or 50 years old. That's my brother? Come on, it seems that there are not many experts in our school." Zhao Wenmin smiled and said nothing. The monk speaks for no name, but the Tao speaks for longevity. The child's parents, with the secret instruction of the official from the county government, didn't talk to the child too much about Jingwei View. What is the name of the ancestral palace? The child smiled and became happy. It's good, the school is small, there are not many people, the study rules will not be so strict, I can stay in bed in the future. Schoolwork or something, brother is right, don't worry when you get to the mountain. Brother, tell the truth, how much money did you secretly give to my parents? I'm so happy after selling my own cups. Must be quite a lot. When I first went out, it hurt my heart. The Taoist laughed dumbly and had to comfort him. Your parents have some money but not much. The reason why they are happy is that they trust the brothers' sect and they don't worry too much about your practice on the mountain. The child said, Senior brother, can we marry a wife? Yes. Then wait for me to go up the mountain for a few years, and then go down to marry the stupid neighbor's stupid boy. She is very stupid in school and writes crookedly. She always climbs out of the grid and the husband sighs. If she doesn't look as good as she was when she was a child, let's talk about it. The child's little abacus crackled. He cheered up and asked softly, What kind of brother, why don't you come to be my master? Still making a small calculation, the guy next to him looks like a good-tempered person. When he is a senior, no matter what, he will do wrong in the future, be scolded and beaten and can't protect himself, but if he becomes his own master, he. Right, brother, I think you are a good person with a good temper and listening to your words. Very good, my master, you will be you in the future, do you want to swear? Xuanhuan had some headaches, but the ancestor master took the eyes of his disciples as always. Hacky. In fact, when he was able to go to the mountains to practice, it was the ancestor who helped his direct disciple to receive a copy. Is it considered as paying off the debt this time? A purple-clothed old man with a hip flask hanging on his waist suddenly appeared on the side. Xuanhuan was about to get up and beat the chief inspector. The old man waved his hand, emptied and annoying. Yuxian and Confucian Temple found an excuse and came out to relax. This discussion took too long and it was really boring. Now that I finally received a new biography, I always have to come over and take a look. Yuxian thought for a while, coughing, and hardly raised his face as an old on the mountain. Xuanhuan reminded in a low voice, Your master is here. The child raised his head and looked at the extremely awkward old face, and the teacher who can hit him with charcoal with his eyes closed. What's the difference? The child wrinkled his face and felt so wrong that he wanted to cry. This time it was not acting but really scared. The child's idea is very simple. How can the school run close to home after reaching the mountain? Do you have to eat enough to run home in one go? Are you hungry? Yuxian squatted down quickly, staring fiercely at the young master who couldn't do such a small thing, and then comforted the child. Jingxiao, I am the master. The child was stunned. How could he seem to be the old liar who can't even afford candied haws? He spent time and took out a handful of copper coins. Almost all the belongings were left. Only the money for the candied haws was left. The rest was passed to the senior. Just so much money you give him, I go home, take more, give you some money, wait for me here, I know the way, don't send it. Slapped the copper coin in the hands of the Taoist priest, and the child ran away. The Taoist priest was stunned and looked at the old patriarch carefully. Why don't you go to protect the way for your little uncle? Jingxiao is such a child, you, a teacher nephew, can you rest assured, ha? Xuanhuan smiled and left. Yuxian looked up at the sky. Taking off the scarlet gourd around his waist, the old Taoist took a sip of wine. I have forgotten everything, refining the galaxy, and quickly entered the Taoist country. Yuxian withdrew his gaze. His mother, the old thrones in the wild world like to fight around, don't they? They all crane their necks and wait, sooner or later there will be a galaxy on the top of the head. One after another, people started to leave the Confucian Temple. This time it was no longer going out to drink to relieve boredom, but their discussions had ended. Among them is Chao Pu, the national teacher of the Xiaoyuan dynasty, and Lin Junbai, a proud student. Chao Pu said, Your Majesty, there is no problem with you taking over as the national teacher. You have to solve all other problems, whether in the open or in the dark, by yourself. In fact, it should have been 20 or 30 years later to pave the way for more disciples to be safe, but time does not wait for it, and the delay will be huge. What's more, Lin Junbai can sharpen more. Chao Pu himself needs to rush to another continent immediately and serve as the master of a sect, planning a continent purely as a monk on the mountain. I have to admit that I just walked the old road embroidered Tiger Chui Yang walked. As for the final height, do everything you need to do. Lin Junbai nodded and said, Try not to disappoint your husband. Chao Pu reminded, You can learn more from Qin Pingyan, but don't be the second Qin Pingyan. In fact, you should learn from him most at this point. Lin Junbai knew clearly, yes. The real fire dragon went out of the gate but never left. Almost all the people passing by will greet the old man on the initiative, in a more or less polite way. When the lady of Lushwiking Dandan, who was named Qingzhong, walked out together with the flower owner of Baiwafuti, she saw the back of the real Huolong, and she was about to detour down the stairs immediately. Never thought that the old man turned his head, looked at the bloated woman, smiled and said, "Miss Tundun has a steady footsteps, and she can hear her even if she covers her ears." Mrs. Tandan grabbed the sleeve of the flower master empress and came to see the real fire dragon. The old man was full of regret and sighed, "Pandao hasn't visited Lushui Keng before, and Mrs. Tantan has never been a guest on Diffing. This is a great regret in Pangdao's heart. Mrs. Tandan understands it's a good deal of money and disaster. The money she paid to the Confucian temple, her private money, was actually a little bit." Wei Ying walked out with Song Changjing. Yu Guizhong and the Song clan of Dali concluded an alliance. There are no pledges and no paper contracts are required. It was just a verbal agreement between the two. For example, the Nyang'an Lang of the Penal Department of Dali sends no less than 10 first-class monastic embryos to the Shijianhu Jinjing sect every 10 years. Once he becomes an immortal, he will serve as an offering to the Penal Department of Dali for a period of time. Yijiazi undertook all kinds of secret missions that are not visible. The True Realm sect also dispatched Earth Immortal Sword cultivators to the Dali Frontier Army to serve as military monks. Each of them had been in the army for at least 30 years. No real realm immortal monk could shirk. Yaxing stood at the top of the steps outside the gate of the Confucian temple, looking at a certain part of the sky. Jing Shengsiping stood by and asked with a smile, "Since you are not assured, why don't you let him know?" Yaxing said, "He is not the age of the child, so what to do with this?" Shiping smiled and asked, "I'm very curious, I have to ask if I don't want to ask, Chui Yang didn't curse people over the city?" Yaxing shook his head, "No. I just say that if he was born 100 or 200 years earlier, many fewer people would die in the world. Unfortunately, he was born too late and only had a plan for more than 100 years, so he had to hurry and it would be hard to avoid being stretched." Shiping can't laugh or cry. "Xiuhu, are you still stretched?" Yaxing thought of the last scene on the other side of the city. After the two sides sat and talked, Chui Yang raised his palms and put them to his ears as if listening. It was as if the wind blew away all the whimpers in the world when the sky was poured. They were both awe-inspiring and wild. On the side of Auto Mountain, Nan Guangzhou suddenly became a little upset, so he worked for himself. A gentleman asks about disasters but not for blessings. It is the emphasis of the Confucian children. As for the rich and the poor, the longevity is rich, the life is short and long, and life is divided. Nan Guangzhou does not believe this either. After looking at the hexagram, Nan Guangzhou was sweating profusely and was at a loss. His heartstrings became tense, and he made up his mind to retreat and must go in seclusion. Even if the Confucian temple asked him to rush to the battlefield, he would still find an excuse to delay for several years. The blessed land flower owner of Baihua Fudi went back to the collapsed place, spread out colored notes on the book table, but did not know what to write. His arm lazily pressed his arm. She sighed faintly. After all, she could not see the man who had been missing for many years. He glanced down at his arms and engraved 4 lines of text in cursive seals. Rongronghu Bikingsi ride, glittering orb pink makeup. The sour wind on the bridge shots the eyes, and the moss grass grows on the gourd surface. The last 2 lines of inscription, with only 2 characters respectively, are the 2 names he engraved, like a Taoist couple on the mountain, cuddling each other. Back then she was just an ordinary flower in Baiwafuti, and her rank was not high. At that time she was named xianxia. The name xianxia he has been away for a few years and has been abandoned for many years. She put down the pen, gently opened her arms and put it on her back. There were 4 small characters in it: clean mind and nourish energy. It was written that the dragon and the snake flew away, and the spirit of the word was just like that person. Even if she knew that the Confucian temple was discussing this time, the chance of meeting him was not great, but she was thinking of the in case. In case is 10,000. Lin of Confucian Temple of Merit. Wenxing is in the same vein. Old scholar. Around Lu 16 Qin Pingan. Li Baoping, and the little spirit who was brought to the world by Lu Shirlu from Yuafu. And Mao Xiaodong. The old scholar was very fierce drinking and soon became drunk and dim, muttering, "Is it true?" After getting drunk, the dreams come true, which made this old man a little bit incredulous. The old scholar suddenly slapped the table. "It doesn't feel like yelling while drinking. Who can say something?" All eyes without exception were lost to Qin Pingan, the student, junior and junior uncle. Before, Qin Pingan had just a horizontal sword on his knees, sipping wine, thinking about someone. Sui Zuixiang, the world is small, the universe is narrow, ancient and modern short. Smiled and caressed Qingping with a 3-foot sword in his hand, never lost his life. Sword of Coming Chapter 805. Night Ship, Lingxi City. In the evening of this day, Ning Yao planned to go to the next city. She just opened the night ship ban, and the sword light went straight into the sky. So that Zhongtu Confucian Temple knows the whereabouts of this ferry. Before leaving, Ning Yao brought Pei Qian, millet grains and the white-haired boy to find the female city lord who is known as the Haoran World Graceful Poetry Sect. In addition to thanking Lingxi City for the hospitality, he also helped Chen Pinggan's friend Jiang Xianxia. Give her a message. Mrs. Li and the handsome boy with the first antlers walked on the covered bridge above the sea of clouds with some foreign guests. There was a beautiful sunset near the covered bridge, like a precious lichen of bright red color. Climbing high and overlooking, the scenery is pleasant, the mountains are beautiful day and night, the birds are reunited, the world is quiet and peaceful. Mrs. Li was suddenly upset because at the end of the bridge, an uninvited group of guests came from Xingqing City. She admires Ning Yao, but that doesn't mean she likes all sword repairs. Ning Yao is to the swordsmanship of the world, just like she is to the poems and essays. She will never lose to any man, ancient and modern. Ning Yao frowned slightly, wondering how this night ship would have an ascendant swordsman for no reason. Could this person come for Chen Pinggan? But the opponent seems to be hurt? Ning Yao turned his head and said to Mrs. Li, I came to see us. Madam will just sit on the sidelines. If Lingxi City is accidentally broken, I will definitely pay the price afterwards. She has no money, Chen Pinggan has. Mrs. Li nodded, really unwilling to mix up these awe-inspiring right and wrongs and grievances on the mountain. So she left here with the boy with antlers who was born from the cultural movement. Criminal officer. The direct disciple Du Shanin. Handmaid Jiqing, the incarnation of ancestral money. Du Shanin saw the sword-backed woman, a little nervous, called Ning Jianxian, and then self-registered, and said that he was living in the streets of Jianqi Great Wall. Jiqing smiled sweetly, gave a blessing and called Miss Ning. Ning Yao nodded in return. There was a rare smile on the criminal officer's lifeless face. He signed up. My name is Haosu. I was in the Great Wall of Jianqi and I have been in jail. Ning Yao felt stunned, clasped his fist and said, I have seen senior criminal officer. She has not seen a criminal officer, but has heard of the name, Haosu. Chen Shi, who was renamed Chen Ji in Feishing City, mentioned it to her a few years ago. Said that next time the door is opened, if this person can come to the fifth world and is willing to continue to serve as a criminal officer, it will be a great help to Feishing. Criminal officer Haosu, although he had a natural prejudice against Chen Pinggan, it was only because Chen Pinggan had a blessed land. Only then took Pei Qian and the others to another city. Ning Yao smiled and asked, Xiaomi Li, remember how many swords I handed out? Millet's expression seriously thought about it. I can't remember, it doesn't seem to be too much. Ning Yao smiled and said, That's good. Pei Qian carried the big basket on his back, breathed a sigh of relief silently on the account book in his heart, and made another credit for the millet grains. Xiaomi Li sighed, scratching his face while poking the road on the ground with a hiking stick and said pitifully, Although the good man mountain master is busy with business, he must feel that his days are like years every day. Think about it, it is pitiful. The white-haired boy slapped his forehead and wiped his face with the palm of his hand. This small grain of rice is really not worth mentioning as the guardian of the Luapa mountain. Pei Qian asked, Madam, will the Jian Xiu on the Feishing City miss master? Ning Yao smiled and nodded, yes. Pei Qian hesitated, is the impression good? Ning Yao nodded, old people, young people, they have not bad impressions of him. Of course there must be some bad ones, but the number is very small. Especially the younger generation of sword repairers in Feishing, practicing qishir and wufu. What do you think of the hidden official who stayed alone on the head of the city? Fortunately, it is his own. Pei Qian smiled and said, From then on, I will go to the Xianxia calendar there. Ning Yao thought for a while, what is the reason? On the bridge of Lingxi City, the boy with antlers with sleeves on both hands asked softly, The master really wants to step down as the lord of the city? Who is it for? For so many years, the ferry passing by, the owner has not selected a suitable person. The monks stayed in the city, and the owner looked down upon him, and we had no contact with outside of the ferry. Mrs. Li smiled and said, Don't worry, it will definitely not be that xianxia will be the city lord. The boy with antlers stretched out a finger and rubbed his temple. The thought of that old boat would make him irritable. Many years ago, Xianxia went on a boat trip and accidentally ran into a night boat. That time there was no Lu Shen beside him, so he still had to board the ship again, saying that he must see Mrs. Li, and thank you face to face. Mindless, Lingxi City without opening the door, the ferry chatter went around, bumping all the way between the major cities of the night ship, eating closed doors here and bumping a nose over there. Everywhere the old boat couldn't help cursing. Be beaten after scolding, run away after being beaten, scold again after running, scold again after beating, iron bone. Lao Zhozi spent a full 100 years and he was still holding on there. He had to take a trip to Lingxi City before he was willing to disembark. According to the posture, as long as he didn't enter Lingxi City for a day, Xianxia would be able to wander on the night ship. In the end, the owner really couldn't stand it and got the boat's advice from the master. The latter did not want Xianxia to stay on the night boat for too long, because perhaps the third master of Baiyujing would miss too much, and once he was separated by a world of Lu Shen, took the opportunity to master all the mysteries of the Fairy Avenue. Maybe it would be accidental. The night ship left Haoran, drifting to the Qingming world. What can't Lu Qin do? It can even be said that this Baiyujing's third head teacher only likes to do things that the world can't do. Mrs. Li only met Xianxia. She never thought that this old boat was really insane. The ghost has fought the wall for more than 100 years, just to thank her and say that Mrs. Li has an initial phrase. It's the best in the world, the first is the best. Suzy and Liuqi are all written in a smoky atmosphere. When I met Mrs. Li's flower chant, I had to stand aside. It turns out that Mrs. Li once wrote an ode to osmanthus, but she compares herself to sweet-scented osmanthus. Since she is the best among flowers, Mei Ding will be ashamed. As a result, he was appointed by that Xianxia as the first word in the world. After thanking him, Xianxia was sent out of the country by the ship's master's gift. Master Zhang smiled and reminded this person not to come again in the future. Night ships are not welcome. Never thought that the old Zhozi snorted and broke the place, so I won't come. The thought of Xianxia made me feel bad. The antler boy hurriedly changed the subject and said, the woman who doesn't talk much, Wufu, has a pair of brilliant eyes. Mrs. Li was absent-minded, nodded and said casually, since people's eyes can pretend to be the sun and the moon. The monks on the mountain and the ordinary masters under the mountain can't accommodate a few people in front of them. The owner is sad and the antler boy is sad. Before his life, the Lord finally settled in a foreign land called Linen, but he never wrote a poem for that beautiful place. Yanjianan Linen, Qizhou, Qingzhou, Hangzhou. On the Gongdalan side of the Confucian temple, visitors kept coming, staying more and more soon, just chatting with Wensheng. Lu Qi and his good friend Chao Zhu, the monk of Shenkong Temple knowingly, the Feishan Palace holds the shadow, the pair of Taoists in Tianyu Cave Fuyazhu Liuxia. 4 of the 5 mountain monarchs of Middle-earth came. Except for the great Suishan, all came. Wuhu Shuijun came together even more. Among them was the Moon Lake Li Yeho, who took his maidservant Xuanhuan, and he was a hero of the boundless martial artist. Li Yeho brought a few pots of his own wine to the old scholar. At first glance he was familiar with the old scholar and he laughed. Every time Lao Xiaocai receives visitors, Qin Pingan is always with him. It was Qin Pingan who stooped to catch the copybook for the first time, and then smiled and handed it to the 10-level martial artist named Da Qing. Besides, it seems that all the guests who came to Gongdalan probably never thought that this old talent would really respond. The female mountain monarch of Yanji Mountain, named Zhu Yuxian, has a weird name and bitter vegetable. She came with Zhu Mei, a young sword repairman from the Xiaoyuan dynasty. There is an opportunity for the immortal family that the two parties have reached an agreement. Zhu Mei and Qin Pingan reunited after a long time. Laughing, she was not at all unfamiliar, clasped her fists and joked, the little woman has seen a gentle and frugal hermit. Qin Pingan smiled and said, Ms. Zhu is serious. The old scholar stroked his beard and nodded. Ms. Zhu said these words well. Xianxia Zhu family, there is a girl Zhu and it's really an ancestor that burned high incense. Qin Pingan spread out his pen and paper, and the old scholar temporarily wrote a poem about the ancient Xianxia road and gave it to Zhu Mei. As a congratulatory gift from Yanji Mountain, Zhu Yuxian, the only female mountain monarch in China, except for a long bamboo box filled with 12 boxes of rare rouge and gouache. She also took out an origami black-clothed swallow, condensed with 2 rich cultural luck and aura of mountains and rivers, which can be placed on the beams of the house or behind the plaque, and the family is equivalent to having an extra incense villain. However, there is a requirement that the ancestral house where the origami swallows are placed must be close to the mountains. There are high mountains within 100 miles. It is better to have orthodox mountains in a country. It cannot be the kind of house located on the plains or on the banks of the big water. Those who came to Gongdalan to celebrate the restoration of the Confucian temple shrine to the old scholars were still a minority, and more monks had already left the boundaries of the Confucian temple one after another. For example, Mo Jiajue was already on his way to the Great Wall of Jianghu after the discussion was over, surrounded by the ranger Su Wei. When Su Wei mentioned the young hidden official, the dull-looking Mo Jiajuzi shook his head without saying a word. Obviously he didn't want to talk more about him. Su Chang knew the reason was Gu Kan's. Because this Mo family's huge son by his side used to cut off his daughter for righteousness. Therefore, if there is no accident, Qin Pingan, who does not kill Gu Kan, will count on the Mo family in the future, and it will always be the relationship of the well water and the river water. Taishishin Gua Outing, Luxia's a female fairy Tsong Qian and others, never returned to the sect first and set off. Huolong patted Qin Pingan on the shoulder and suddenly said, I don't cherish my life and survive without ruining the festival. I don't have the courage of a man on weekdays. When it's critical, tens of thousands of people are going to be a man. Qin Pingan said, Don't dare to be. The old real man stared, Is the poor road talking about you? Qin Pingan said, I have admired the ancient style and chivalry of real people for many years, but the younger generations have not learned like them. The old man patted the young man's head and laughed, Smelly boy. The old scholar exclaimed in the distance, What about it? Qin Pingan asked, Where are Mr. Yu and the young Yuan Su? The old real man smiled and said, So the poor Dao will help Xuanmi protect the Dao. Being a man can't just take advantage. After the fire dragon left, Qin Pingan returned to his husband. I'm going to tell you something that doesn't sound too good. Except for the old man and the saint, the whole world is vast. Don't think that without yourself the sky will fall. The old scholar said, So you can wait until you have enough energy and it won't be too late to kill the big thieves. Qin Pingan nodded and said, Understood. Later, the wife of Dongzhu from Zhong to Xuanhuan also came to visit Wenxing. She is a woman with permanent color and looks like a girl. Next to me was a girl named Xin Shi who was holding a peach blossom fan, with a bright moon painted on it, and a poem written on bamboo branches. The old Shutsai just pulled up left and right this time, the latter was at a loss, I don't know what his husband meant. When Mrs. Juanxiu, the master of the cave, talked to Mr. Wensheng, the girl from the temple was looking at Mr. Zhua, who had not seen each other for 100 years. From left to right he saw the girl's questioning eyes and nodded and smiled. Once after 2 times he ignored her. Since this girl who cannot remember her name has missed Cui Yang for many years, why didn't she go to Aquarius Island to meet her for more than 100 years? Xuanhuan, the mellow scholar of Nan Pasuazhou, the contemporary patriarch Xuanhuan, in addition to visiting Wensheng, he also had conversations with Qin Pingan, including Lu Xianyang who had traveled far to study. The old master Fu Xing still came to Qin Pingan to talk about Lu Qingfeng in the Aquarius Lion Park. In addition, Yang Qingyan, the national teacher of the Chongxin department of the Deyuan dynasty, took this opportunity to chat with Qin Pingan about business matters. As for Lei Gongmiao Peiaxiang, his female disciple Lu Suiyu, and an old martial artist named Wang Fiyuan, they rushed to Qin Ping and Peiaxiang came to Qin Pingan because of the money. When Master Qian met, the 2 parties had an appointment. In the future, disciples of Leigong Temple's line and Luopashan can communicate frequently with each other, asking questions about martial arts. As for Wang Fushuan, at first he planned to have a fist with the young hidden official, but he caught a glimpse of the one sitting at the table and holding the book in one hand. After thinking about it, let it go. Not in a hurry. Besides, if oneself bullies a young man who has not learned boxing for a few years by relying on his age, it is unreasonable that he will not win. Lu Kaishan from Iazhao took his wife and children to visit, and apart from anything else, he took out a lot of presents from the nearby objects and piled them up on the stone table. Not implicit enough? Will it look bad on face? What's so bad about money? And when they left, the richest couple in the world seemed to forget to take away that inconspicuous thing. Lu Yuzhou saw the young hidden official with a bright smile and called his name. Qin Pingan smiled and nodded, then stood up and folded his fists to thank the family 3 people. Qin Pingan said with a solemn expression, Thanks to the Lu family for the Great Wall of Sword Qi, but there will be dispatches in the future. You only need to fly a sword and send a letter to Luapa Mountain. Qin Pingan must immediately hurry to Iazhao. An ape mansion on the upside-down mountain is the Great Wall of Sword Qi given by Liu's initiative. Not only that, but many hidden industries, money and things, were handed over to the Summer Palace. Lu Jubao stood up, smiled and replied with a fist and said, The hidden official is serious. Lu will not act like this. Some things are not business. I only hope that when the hidden official passes by Aizhou in the future, he must visit our home as a guest. Then Qin Pingan said something that surprised both the old scholar and Lu Jubao. Can the younger generation beg for an anonymous guest with Lu? Lu Jubao was stunned, without a word of nonsense, and laughed heartily. That's it. I glanced around at the little brother. Know the reason. On the Great Wall of Jianxi, there are two sword immortals from Aizhou, Li Ding and Zhang Xiao. Very disliked for his hometown, but in the end he still died as the sword repairman of Aizhou. Among the hundreds of families of the philosophers, many ancestors who can come are here. After all, they are different from the general big monks. They are regarded as hybrid officials, and they all need to look at the Confucian temple to act. The two ancestors of the military family were the first to visit. Old ancestor Jiang was standing next to Su Bai, looking at the woman in red in the distance. Mr. Fan, the ancestor of the merchant, was the last to visit and chat with Chen Pingyan. On the contrary, he talked more about the past than with the old scholar. Among them he talked about the robe of Kaik mansion in Luzhou, Beiju. Hearing Mr. Fan said he wanted to get a piece of the pie with a cheeky, Qin Pingan was of course very welcome and gave out 30%. Brother Junqian's real name is Xianxia, who is just a monster monk. The real name is very important. Therefore Xianxia, under the reminder of his master, just named himself Zheng Yugan not long ago. According to the preface in the secret book of the immortal family that allowed me to embark on the path of cultivation, all the knowledge comes from Qianhua, and the immortal master who compiled the book is named Zheng. Since learning the magic of the immortal family is to inherit the blessing of the immortal master, it is the protection and blessing of that senior in the dark, so the little spirit solemnly named himself Xianxia. Besides, let's not talk about the real name, just talk about the pseudonym who walked the rivers and lakes. How good is the homophony, so rich? In the future, as long as you have money, you must go back to your hometown to repair the tomb of the immortal master Zheng. Qin Pingan heard from senior brother Junqian that this little guy likes to read, and he is still a violent temper. Zheng Yuqian came from the blessed land of Yuhua from Tonggishao. In that blessed place, if there is a chi trainer to form a golden pill, you can emerge and ascend, and it once belonged to an inferior blessed place that was typically poorly managed by the Shangzong Xianban. Because the sex background is not enough, it is really powerless to upgrade the feather-blessed land to the middle rank. Once you reluctantly act, it is easy to drag down the sect and make clothes for others. Zheng Yugan trembled and said, "His lord hidden officer." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Call the little uncle." Zheng Yuqian clenched fists with both hands, palms full of sweat, and nodded with a sullen face. "Okay, hidden officer, young master." Qin Pingan became more and more weird and worried, so he immediately asked, "Brother Junqian, it is because I carry the real name of the demon, so Zheng Yugan is very afraid of me?" Lu 16 shook his head and smiled. "No, you are converging pretty well now. Zheng Yugan's current cultivation level can't be noticed at all. It's just that this kid is naturally young. I took him through the barren world before and I heard about it there. Many deeds about you. What is the southern sovereign minister and the northern hidden officer? The sword is insidious, killing monsters like hemp. As long as you catch a monster cultivator, you will either slash or cut at the waist. What else is your favorite on the battlefield?" He swallowed his opponent alive. Once Zheng Yuqian heard that you were the hidden official, and finally saw the ruins of the Great Wall of Swordqi, he was even more afraid of you. He said that he admired you as a young master and he really met you anyway. It looks like this. It's almost you, seeing the mood of the left and right. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "I am not afraid of senior brother Zhua." Some heard people say and understood, some heard the answer but still didn't understand and embarrassed to ask again and afraid of forgetting. In the above, I felt that I would see you soon at the beginning, but I didn't expect it took so long to meet, so there are 2 booklets. Qin Pingan put it in his sleeve. He'll take it first, watch it slowly and give some of my answers, not necessarily all of them. I will return it to you together with the talisman book. Li Huai was anxious and flushed. "Don't just flip and look, Qin Pingan, don't be so serious." Qin Pingan smiled. "You didn't write this casually." Li Huai helplessly said, "How much knowledge we have, can we be the same? I really can't read books. I don't understand the question, don't you just take a look at the trivial things?" If it weren't for Qin Pingan, Li Huai would have been hiding these 2 books. Qin Pingan patted Li Huai on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Your brother-in-law, I have met him, he is a nice man." Li Huai grinned, "It's my brother-in-law after all." In the darkness that day, the old xianxia took the three students and drank a little wine together. The breeze was cool and the hearts of the people were warm. Look left and right into the distance. Chao Ci, dressed in white, holds a yellow bamboo scabbard. Come to Gongdalan alone and visit Chinpingan. The old scholar squeezed his chin. If you want to fight, it will be difficult. If pay cup comes, it is not a problem at all. Old scholars will use their housekeeping skills to convince people with reason and morals. The scholars are only noisy and never do anything, not to mention that the other party is still a girl. Left and right said, since it's not pay cup, if you are asked to punch, you will fight by yourself. Chinpingan nodded, I will go alone. Chinpingan took off the long sword behind his back, put it on the table and went to see Chao Ci. The two young men from the Great Wall of Jianghu, after 3 rounds of questioning, had separated for many years and finally met again tonight. The world of martial arts is divided into half, and Chao Ci is a green shirt guest in white clothes. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.